On this episode of the DTVC podcast, Scott Murphy from All 90s Action All the Time is on, and we're going to be looking at Into the Sun. So we're going to continue this march through the Steven Seagal DTV oeuvre that we started. It was, I think, movie number 11 for us. So stay tuned for that in just a bit. And then next week, Ty from Comeuppance is on, and we are going to be looking at two from Aaron Eckhart. We'll be looking at, if I can remember the names of them, Classified was one of them. The other one was like Rumble Through the Dark. So one on Hulu, one on Tubi. So check that out next week. Still deciding if we're going to call it the Aaron Eckhart on the Skids or Aaron Eckhart Double Feature. So one way or the other. And then in 2 weeks' time, Sean Malloy from I Must Break This podcast is back on to talk more Jean-Claude Van Damme. We're going to be looking at Legionnaire. So that was another fun conversation there. So look for that one in 2 weeks. And something I want to point out about all three of these episodes, I'm still trying to get the hang of using Jitsi. And in each of them, I got booted from the episode at some point. It might have to do with my internet connection. I'm not sure. Skype was always good about that. Skype would maintain a pretty solid internet connection throughout, whereas Jitsi will sometimes boot you. And so in each of those, so if, for example, in this one, you'll hear a certain point where Scott's talking, and then I come back and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I got cut off." Continue what you were saying. So just keep that in mind as we're sort of getting the hang of Jitsi here. But hopefully that won't keep happening. Hopefully I'll just, my internet will stay good and I won't get booted all the time. But, fingers crossed, we'll see anyway. And the DTVC Extra, I was saying how, it could be a while before we do that again. I'm actually thinking about doing one in the near future because I watched New Mutants. And so I'm kind of close at this point to doing all of the theatrical feature Marvel movies. So I think the only three I've got left to do in terms of feature-length films that were released in the theater, I think the only ones I've got left are Wakanda Forever, Ant-Man and Wasp, Quantumania, and the third Guardians of the Galaxy movie. Otherwise, I'll have seen them all. And then in terms of TV movies, I have to see the second of the two Reb Brown Captain America movies. I have to see Doctor Strange. I found that one somewhere. So there's a TV movie, Doctor Strange, they had with Jessica Walters. She played the villain in it. So that was really cool. And then those the Hulk TV movies, I don't know if I've seen those. I can't remember having seen those or not. I remember them being on. I remember them airing in the late 80s. But I just, I probably could go for another watch of those. I think they're all on Tubi. But in terms of feature ones, it's just those three. So, but I did New Mutants because that was one that I hadn't seen yet. And it got me thinking about maybe doing a DTVC Extra on just the mutant movies, because I think there's a lot to discuss there, and just in terms of like how Fox treated the mutant movies, and then when Disney took over and sort of what happened with those. I mean, especially something like New Mutants and how that one kind of got, I don't want to say shelved, it just kind of got pushed out there and nobody really cared about it on Disney's side. So stay tuned for that. We'll see if that happens. Now also, we've got the YouTube channel, and so this week I'm looking to do the casino shootout in Zero Tolerance. That's what I'm thinking of doing. I found that movie on YouTube, and so I feel like that could be a fun one to do. I've watched it a couple times through, and I think I've got a lot that I can do on it. So get back to PM. I guess it seems like I don't know if it's going to always be every other week as a PM movie. We'll see. But PM just has so many good ones, right? That it's hard to go away from PM for too long. But the most recent one is up right now. I looked at the end fight scene in Strike Commando, so that's available. I haven't put the Instagram reel up for that one yet. Hopefully I'll do that one soon, because I've got to just sort of grab a piece of the movie or a piece of the overall video, just grab a snippet of it in OBS and then post it on Instagram. So hopefully I'll do that soon. But this week, we'll see. Hopefully it'll be Zero Tolerance. The other thing, of course, this is a holiday week here in the United States, and so I may fall behind on some of those things. So we'll see what happens. And then in terms of the site, Save Me is the next one listed as being up. We just did Black Creek this past weekend, so Save Me is the next one. Hopefully we'll get that one in this weekend again with the holiday. Things could be up in the air. The other thing is I watched Final Recovery, which is most recent one from Harley Whalen. So I do his films. I usually get screener requests from producer Joe Williamson, and so he reached out about that one, so I did watch it. I just got to do the review. So that's a screener review that should be coming soon as well, so keep an eye out for that too. But Save Me is kind of the next one on the list. Like I said, it's an erotic thriller with Harry Hamlin, which we covered on a previous podcast episode with John from After Movie Diner at PM Podcast. So, I'm wanting to do more erotic thrillers on the site anyway. And this one's an interesting one because it's, like I said, Colas McKay does stunts on it, I believe. And then Jesse V. Johnson was like a set designer or something like that. So two big DTV names that we know of now are kind of part of the production. So I thought that could be kind of a fun one to do. I think that is everything. I am looking to record soon with John from After Movie Diner for his After Movie Diner podcast. So keep an eye out for that. But yeah, I think that's everything. So why don't we get stuck in here? Of course, before we go too far in, keep an eye out for my novel Nadia and Aiden. The link is in the podcast description. Always appreciate if someone wants to pick that up or pick up any of my books. It is the summer, right? I know there's always summer reading, right? That goes on. People, as far as I know, I understand that people read during the summer, and so my books make for great summer reading if you were so inclined to do some summer reading. Whether you bring an actual book out to the beach with you, or the lake house, or the mountains, or whatever it is that you do your summer reading, or if you want it on a Kindle, right? Or if you have an iPad with a Kindle app, my books are also available on those. And of course, if you're south in the southern hemisphere, they're great winter reading as well, I think. And then, of course, as I always say, my books also look really great on your shelf as well. So if you don't feel like reading them, but you want to have them on your shelf, hey, that works for me too. A sale is a sale, as I always say. But anyway, why don't we cut this here, and we'll have John from Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures playing our theme song. And then when we come back, Scott Murphy from All 90s Action All the Time will be on, and we will be looking at Into the Sun. Hey everyone, welcome back to the DTVC podcast. As always, this is Matt here, and I am joined once again by a very special guest. We've got Scott Murphy from All 90s Action All the Time, continuing our look at Seagal's DTV oeuvre. Welcome back, Scott.
Thanks for having me back, Matt. Yes, we've really committed to this bit, and now we're 11 films in, and still going.
Yes. Now, one of the things that kind of struck me as, like you said, 11 movies in, but also it's this thing where we watch these movies in somewhat quick, not, rapid succession, but, every month or two. It's like you don't go too far without a Seagal movie, right?
That is true.
Watch them. And I was wondering, as I'm watching some of the stuff in this and some of like the tropes and things that we're going to be talking about in here, and I wonder, is it as a watcher of these movies at this point, do you feel like are you desensitized to the bonkersness that happens in these Seagal movies and do you sort of more accept it? Or are you more sensitive? Like, are you more keen to pick it up than you might not have been if you hadn't seen a bunch of these in a row?
That is an interesting question because I'm not 100% sure because um like in a certain sense I am desensitized to it because I'm like when I put on another Seagal film, whether I've not seen it before, or like in the case of this one I has seen it before, like I'm kind of aware that it's like, well, I'm plugging into like the Seagal universe, and the Seagal universe like doesn't make sense, and like it's mad, and he is very much the center of it. He is the god of the Seagal universe, and like everybody treats him like that in these movies, which is hilarious, and which we've talked about on a number of occasions, I guess. Um, but I think like when you watch more and more of them, like it's like, so you have like an even keener eye of, we've talked a lot of times about the Seagal checklist, and you have an even keener eye of the checklist, and like, and you might even add things to the checklist of like, oh, that is a common recurring trope, okay, that gets added to the list, so it's a bit of both, I think, weirdly.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Where it's like you become more accepting of certain things as just like, okay, this is what happens in these movies. I almost think, I mean, I think we've talked about this before, that sometimes with like with other movies outside of the Seagal verse, it's almost like your tastes become a little bit more adjusted, where you're like, that movie's not so bad compared to what I just watched the Seagal movie where he was sliding across a 20-foot floor or something like that. Like this isn't so bad. But like you said, like you said, you've got the checklist, and I think that's the thing. I'm adding things to my checklist that I didn't think I would be adding. That's definitely a true piece of that, where it's like, oh, that's something we've seen like 4 of these movies so far, or this is something that I never would have thought. Like I never would have, writing reviews about Seagal movies, I wouldn't have thought, even though I've reviewed all of his direct-to-video movies on my site. I don't know if I would have picked out some of the things that we've been picking out here. And it's like, yeah, you go in with your bingo card, and
Yeah.
yeah.
No, absolutely. No, I mean, like you say, I mean, there's certain things that are added to the checklist that are like kind of like I never thought about before. Like it wasn't, even before we started this journey, like I'd obviously seen kind of all his kind of theatrical films, and then I'd seen like a couple of his direct to video films based on like doing the season on on my podcast, and so a couple of years ago I watched a couple of his direct to video films and stuff like that. But like yeah, there's other things that I've like noticed like while we've been doing this journey. For example, and this happens in this movie, and it's not something I noticed before as like a common Seagal trope, but it's happened enough now that I'm like, oh, this is a thing. Where like before a sex scene, there's like this weird, awkward, quote unquote sexy hug that he does. And it's like his go-to move. And I was like, and yeah, I didn't, yeah. So that's something that's been added to the checklist since we started doing this journey. For example,
Right. And it is. It's like it's for people who don't know this awkward hug that you're talking about, and it does happen in this movie. And I thought the same thing. I was like, oh, the awkward hug gets checked off the list. It's like his arms go around the person, almost like beyond their person, and then it's like his like wrists or like elbows or something come back, so that like it's almost like you're hugging somebody you don't want to hug. It's weird. It's like
yeah.
it's like his forearm doesn't touch the person, I guess, is maybe the best. I don't know if that's describing it right.
Yes, that I think that is describing it right. It's kind of like, yeah. Like you say, it's kind of like the way you might hug a person that you kind of don't really want to hug. Like it's like, like like they're invading your space or something. You're like kind of like, all right, yeah, I guess we're doing this. We kind of know each other. I don't know if we're really on these terms, but like
Right.
yeah.
And I mean, in this one, we also get the Seagal kiss. And I wonder if he saw
Oh
himself
yeah.
kissing his co-star in this afterwards and thought, boy, I'm really not good at that, because we almost don't get that anymore. It's usually the awkward Seagal hug and then it's fade to black. And they
Yeah.
wake up together and he's fully dressed in bed and she's usually, scantily clothed or something. And we can fill in the gaps, which is fine, right? There's no need, no need to go any further than that. But yeah, I wonder if he was just like, I look horrible at this, or maybe a director just said, hey, maybe we don't do that anymore. I don't know.
I do wonder because there's certain things that stop, and like I mean, uh, I guess I don't want to. I guess I don't want to sink to the level of just making fat jokes, um, but I would say post the 90s, regardless of weight, I think that somebody mentioned to him that he looks very very silly while running, and like he doesn't really post the 90s. You don't really get much running, and I know there's lots of low hanging fruit jokes to be made about
Right.
his inability to run, but like, I don't know, like that's one thing that's like not on the checklist post his theatrical career,
Right. No, it's the stunt double with a ponytail that does the running from here on. Yeah. I
Yeah.
I mean, that's another fascinating thing about this movie when we get in on this, because there are a few things that happen in this one here. I shouldn't say a few. I think really maybe one when we get to the end fight scene, or a couple things, but there are things that happen here that don't happen much after this. So in '05, we're still in that period where Seagal is still kind of he's creating his own checklist of things, right, that he demands from a movie. And the
Mhm.
one of him being completely omnipotent, it's it's close, but there are a couple moments where baddies get the drop on him. Like they can, one guy in the scene throws him through a coffee table, which we'll talk about when we get to that part. And those are things that later on don't happen at all. The idea of Seagal being thrown through a coffee table. I think the closest thing that happens is when he's in China Salesman, I think is what it's called. I want to call it Chinaman Salesman. It's China Salesman. He's in his stunt double gets beaten up by Mike Tyson, but that's like the closest I think that Seagal gets to being defeated later on.
Right. That's not one I've seen. As we've kind of gone through before, like I've seen like a number of like the 2000s ones, but I've not gone into the 2010s yet. I mean, we'll get there eventually,
Right, yes.
but I've not gone into the 2010s yet. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, when we get that far, that's going to be. I mean, so it's like there's two things with the 2010s, right? Because we're still, like you said, we're still making our way through the 2000s. But with Seagal, there's like the early 2010s, which are just these like extensions of sort of like we saw The Keeper, which is the latest one the latest of Seagal movies we've seen. That one's from 2009. And
2009. Yep.
yeah, and you get like this 2010s thing that's just sort of like an extension of those late 2000s ones, but it's like ramped up even more, and it's all just Keone Waxman directing, and it's just how much does he sit, how few locations does he have, all of that kind of stuff. But then when you kind of turn after like the mid 2010s, and it's this other thing that happens there where it's even less effort from Seagal. And but then you get these other ones like China Salesman and Attrition are two interesting ones, because he seems to be like doing favors for people to do these projects. Or Attrition, he's like really bought in on it. And so there are these fascinating outliers in what is otherwise like this move, this down, I guess, would you call it a downward curve towards like doing less and less in his movies? I don't know if it's a downward curve. I don't know how that would work.
Yeah, no, I think it is like a downward curve, for sure. And I do think like certainly this time, how I mean the other thing that we've talked about as being part of the checklist is like Seagal, cultural appropriator.
Yes.
And like and he like he gets to do all of his he actually gets to do both of his favorite culture movie, because like he does his favorite kind of Asian Japanese culture appropriation, like where he gets to act as a native. And I know like he did live in Japan, and he had the dojo and stuff like that before he came to America and started making movies. But he loves that. And also in the opening scene, we get Durag Seagal, because like that's what he's like whenever he's acting next to a black person. Like and he does the voice, he does the Seagal black scent voice as well in that scene, and not at all in the rest of the movie, which is hilarious.
exactly. Yeah, it's another one of those bingo card ones. Well, maybe we'll get stuck in here on this. And one of the things I should warn people about is that after, I'd say, like that opening scene that you're talking about there, kind of after that until we get to the end fight scene, it's just a lot of stuff that's jumbled together that could take place at any moment. It's supposed to be something of a mystery on the Seagal side, where he's trying to find out who's behind certain things, but really there's like nothing that he does necessarily that figures things out. So it's one of those things where like what we talk about might not be in order of the things that happen. We're just going to kind of go over highlights probably in between the beginning and end. So maybe I'll give a quick warning about that. But plot wise, it's really just Seagal is a CIA agent who's kind of retired. William Atherton is the director of the CIA in Japan, and a politician there is assassinated, and they think it's the Yakuza. And it's like, well, who is our Yakuza expert? Well, the guy who's an expert on everything, of course, right? It's Seagal. And so they call him in, and it turns out actually the Yakuza might be teaming up with the Tongs to sell Golden Triangle heroin. And they're starting in Japan, but they want to sell it in America. That's where the money is. And so he's got to unravel this conspiracy. And also the old guard for the Tong and the Yakuza don't like that these young guys are teaming up to do all of this stuff. So there's other people at play, and we don't know really who's on whose side or whatever. But eventually Seagal will kind of figure it all out. So that's essentially the plot. But I guess maybe we'll get it on that opening sequence, because that's a kind of a gem, right? That lets you know you're in a Seagal movie. So it takes place in Myanmar, which I think it's being shot in Thailand actually, but they say Myanmar.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it would be. I mean, like, it wouldn't be. I'm sure they wouldn't be able to film in Myanmar at the time, based on the whole, military dictatorship, and like that's like, all the stuff that would be happening at Myanmar at the time. Like, so seems unlikely. So yes, I think the whole film was filmed in Japan and Thailand.
Yeah, I think that's what it's. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and you're right. Like, I think the idea of using in Myanmar, I think, is to make it so we know how badass the Gauls character is, right? That they would call him
Yeah.
in with Eddie George to go into Myanmar and take out these heroin farmers, which I would imagine these or say opium or poppy farmers. I would imagine the poppy farmers were probably press ganged into being poppy farmers by the Myanmar military government, but who's really, nobody's counting on that. No. The other thing is we see elephants sort of toting people around. And I think for me, it's supposed to set the scene that this is like a very like, Asian rural kind of setting, right? To have people riding on elephants. I don't know about you, but I think one of the few uses of CGI that I think should always be used and overused is anytime it's big animals or any animals in general. I think do CGI on the animal. We don't need the actual elephants, that kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah. I know what you mean. It's kind of like, when it comes to that sort of stuff, as much as like the CGI is kind of ropey, the CGI that we get is kind of ropey, because like the kind of when they're lifted up in the helicopter when they're extracted,
Yes.
and then you get this kind of dodgy green screen as he talks to his dying friend, like.
Right.
So the CGI might not have been that good, to be fair, if we had the computer generated elephants. But I take your point, and I agree.
Exactly. Now we also get our moment of Seagal grooming here, because so as it's starting, we find out William Atherton is the CIA guy. He's got like they've got these like satellite images, and it's like, oh, I can see all the poppies down there. This is gonna be great score, and so Seagal and
And this is not a Seagal checklist, but just in case listeners haven't seen this, the satellite images are done in classic mid 2000s whooshy film editing. It's very very of the time.
exactly. That's an area where I'm desensitized, because I just saw that and just was like, okay, that's what that. You make a great point that it is exactly.
That's what 2005 looked like.
Exactly. And it was right. And most of these movies would do it at the beginning. It's almost like there's this mindset of like, well, it's going to take a little time for us to get to the action here, so why don't we draw them in sooner with action-packed satellite images? And so it's like, no matter how much they dress that stuff up, it was never action packed. But
oh yeah, no, absolutely. That's like, how are we going to make this exciting? Yeah. Oh, we're going to give it some whooshy editing, and we're going to we're going to slather over a techno soundtrack on top of that, and people are going to lose their fucking minds.
Exactly. And I mean, they hit all those marks here. So we see Seagal, and like you said, Seagal's got a do-rag, right? So kind of what you're in for. And he's paired with Eddie George, who, from American football fans, he was running back for the Tennessee Titans, which at that time he would have been retired, I think, in 05, or he would have been close. His best year, I think, 99, their team was in the Super Bowl, and they came within like a few yards of winning the Super Bowl. Like, they were like that close to scoring the winning touchdown, but they got stopped at the goal line, and that was the game. And so,
okay.
Yeah.
Who beat them, just out of interest?
Like, it was the St. Louis Rams, who are now the LA Rams, who before were the LA. So it was like they were the LA Rams. Oh. They moved to St. Louis.
No, I was aware of the I was aware of the move. I know the team, but I just didn't know. I don't have like immediate recall to like who won the Super Bowl in
no, oh yeah,
because I'm aware. I'm a casual fan of the NFL, but like I don't like know the history of it, and like kind of can't have that I don't have the same recall with it as with football, as we've discussed many times.
Well, it's also an interesting thing, because they the Rams win that one in 1999, and then in 2001 they had a new coach who was like very insistent on winning with offense and like flashy offense, and he played the Patriots. It was the Patriots' first time in the Super Bowl. It's not their first time ever, but their first time in kind of in that dynasty of the Tom Brady and all of that stuff. And
Okay.
yeah, and the coach Bill Belichick was like, "Well, let's muck up the game and make it really hard for them." And he's like, right. And so that's how they ended up winning. Like the Rams started coming back. They were kind of making, their offense was finally starting to go, and they started making a comeback, and they pulled ahead, and the Patriots came down, or they tied the game. The Patriots came down and got a field goal at the very end to win it. The irony is that
how is that? Like, because you're a Patriots fan, right?
Yes.
Aren't you?
Yeah.
Okay. That's kind of like supporting the evil empire, right? That's like
yeah. So they weren't the evil empire then. So at that time they were the plucky underdogs. They were like
the plucky underdogs. Right. Belichick very much comes across to me as like the Mourinho of American football coaches. Just spoiling things for everyone.
Yeah.
No fun for anyone.
but he's not anywhere near as much fun as Mourinho. That's the thing. He is like, it's so the thing.
He's like a boring, but he's not as, you mean in press conferences,
right?
And stuff.
Exactly.
Yes, no, he's not flamboyant. Yes. Yes, no, yes, Mourinho plays a very unflamboyant brand of football, but he is very flamboyant as an interview. Yes.
Exactly.
Whereas Belichick is quite boring. Yes.
Exactly. Right. It's like watching Inter muck it up against Barca in that Champions League final, where you're just like, I like seeing the fact that Inter's beating Barca, but you watch that game and you're just like, man, that is, that's not a fun final to watch. And I guess if you're an Inter fan, it was a fun final. I guess you could say that. I mean, with the Patriots, they changed. The funny thing about that is that they won that first Super Bowl that way. And then the second two that they won, they just had a dominating defense there. They just had just amazing players. And so it wasn't that they mucked the game up. They just were better than everybody. But they also were cheating. They were spying on teams. They were filming practices, things like that. But then the funny thing is in 2007, they almost had a perfect season. They had won every game up until the Super Bowl. And that the Giants, the New York Giants who they were playing, did the same thing. It wasn't quite the same, I say, because they were using their defense to tackle, to get to Tom Brady and stuff sooner, whereas the Patriots used their defense to bother the receivers and make it so the receivers wouldn't be open. But it was still kind of a similar thing where the Giants were the plucky underdogs. They were like, I think almost 2 touchdowns. They were like 11-point underdogs. I think the Patriots were 13-point underdogs when they played the Rams. And then the Giants won and killed the Patriots' undefeated season. I think as a sports fan of Boston sports teams, that was like probably the worst loss that I can think of as a Boston sports fan. Yeah.
I think I watched that. I think I watched that one. Yeah.
The funny thing is I made money on that game because the Patriots were such high favorites, and the Patriots never really won their Super Bowls by that many points. They usually won by about 3 points. So, if it was 11 points, right, meaning so the Patriots would have to win by more than 11 points for you to win the bet if you're betting on the Patriots. So I bet on the Giants with all kinds of people. I took action all over the place and made some good money on that game. But it was like I was almost like I was going to have both because the Patriots were ahead by I think like 2 points. So I would have had, or I think they were ahead by 3 or 4 points. That's right, 4, because when the Giants scored the touchdown, they were up by 3. So I would have had the Patriots win plus win all my bets. And I had it all. And then the guy from the Giants caught the ball against his head. That was essentially what saved the game. And then they went back down and scored the touchdown. So, yeah. Yeah, crazy stuff. Yeah, but Eddie George is in this window as he was one of the best running backs in the league when he was playing with the Tennessee Titans. And it was a time in football when they were starting to get away from the running back, but the running back was still a major player. And so, but yeah, that was the closest he came to winning a championship. I don't remember if he went on to other teams after the Tennessee Titans, but that team was pretty good there in the late 90s. And then. So 2005, I should have probably looked him up before we started talking about him on the podcast. But I feel like he was still kind of playing. I remember he was on a talk show. There's a radio show here in the States, now a podcast called the Dan Le Batard Talk Show. He was Dan Le Batard show. He was a reporter in Miami. And he had Eddie George on, and he had like a lightning round thing or something at the end, and he made a joke about this. He's like, he said something about like, what about doing Steven Seagal direct to video movies? What would you think of somebody who did that? And Eddie George started laughing like it was one of those things. Like, I don't think anybody had ever mentioned this movie on an interview for him before. And he was just kind of like, he was like, yeah.
I guess like he is only in it for like 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Like it is like just like this kind of this kind of pre-credit opening sequence that we have. And again, like you say, it's just kind of to establish like what a badass Seagal is. Like also like I know this is skipping ahead, but yeah, not one of your least favorite things comes up in this movie a lot. Cause like I counted it up that like wait a second. Yeah, so like four of like Seagal's allies, including this, the character played by Eddie George, die in the movie.
Yes. Right. Well, and the Eddie George one, I think, is the worst because he dies for the sake of Seagal grooming us all, right? Because what happens is that, while they're spying on this situation, the people that are riding the elephants, they're going somewhere, I think, or something like that. And so a young woman gets off the elephant to, I guess, maybe to relieve herself. I'm not sure. And one of the
yeah, it definitely seems like she's going for a pee in the bushes. Like,
yes.
Kind of, like that's kind of what the setup is. Yeah.
Right, and she gets accosted by one of the cartel. I don't know if they're cartels, if they're in Myanmar. But one of the people,
one of the drug smugglers,
right? Exactly. What is what? Yeah, and he's accosting her, and Eddie George sees it kind of go off in Seagal's head that he's got to stop this, and Eddie's like, no, we're you're going to give away our location, you're going to blow the whole thing up. But Seagal, he's got to defend the honor of a woman, right? Which again is just grooming us. While he's defending the honor of a woman, we know, as we've been seeing the trivia of these movies, that like no, he's doing these horrible casting calls and all of these other things that Seagal does. But he's got to sell it to us that he's going to defend the honor of a woman. And so when he shoots at the guy, suddenly all hell breaks loose, and they've got to escape out of there. And that's when Eddie George gets hit. So it's like Eddie George wouldn't even have been killed if Seagal didn't have to groom us to show us what a great guy he is when it comes to women. So and it is kind of funny too that like Seagal's like, oh man, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay, man. And they don't really say whether he dies or not. We just don't see him in the movie anymore.
Yeah, that's true. I guess we assume that he kind of dies. Yeah, because we don't see him in the like, and it does look while he's like being cradled by Seagal that he's kind of like bleeding out, kind of thing,
right.
on the on the green screen background,
right.
with on the fake helicopter.
Right.
Like so yes, I think we're supposed to. Yeah, we don't get official confirmation dead, but I think we're supposed to be led to believe that was the case.
Yeah, I can't remember what Seagal said in the black scent to him, but it was something like, no man, you ain't gonna die, man. You're gonna be okay, or something like that. And it like you said, it's again, it's one of those ones that like, you wouldn't think that you'd be checking off your bingo card, but it happens enough in these movies. And like you said, he's talking to a black character that's when with the do-rag and everything. Like he never wears a do-rag again in the movie. He never talks like that again in the movie. He never encounters another a black person in the movie either, right? I think the only he encounters a lot of Asian people, but that's it. In terms of
yeah, that's true. That's true, because most of the movie takes place in Japan, and most of the characters are either Japanese or Chinese. Yeah, most of them are that. So, and then it's just weird. It's just weird because, like, I mean, this isn't like a movie, but like it's if if anybody's watched any episodes of Lawman, he does the exact same thing.
right.
Like when he's like he talks in like his normal voice when he talks to like fellow kind of white officers or whatever. But as soon as he encounters like a black person that is either kind of quizzing, like or in terms of like a perp, or like another a black police officer, whenever he's conversing with a black person, he just immediately switches to this kind of like, Ebonics kind of like sort of New Orleans jive talk thing that he does. And like it's fucking weird as shit. And like
it's such a trip. Yeah, it's so again, it's like one of those things that like you wouldn't know you check it off on your bingo card until you until you see enough of these and realize like, oh no, these are bingo cards. Yeah. So the helicopter flies off, and then we get our opening credit sequence, and it
Which
almost
I should say that it should be mentioned that because like a lot of times we get like just a kind of a very plain title card and then like maybe credits like appearing on the screen like a 90s TV show or whatever. But this has an actual credit sequence that like actual money went on, and like it's quite so it seems like quite the difference, like watching that compared to a lot of the other ones we've watched.
right, for sure. Yeah, this is definitely like I don't know if this is because it's Destination Films that does it, and then I think I'm trying to think, the distributor was one of the big ones. I thought it was like Sony might have been.
I think it's Sony Home Entertainment Pictures, Sony Home Entertainment, would distributed it.
Yeah,
Because like the interesting thing about this movie that I read into, was that like it is a little bit higher budget than his other direct-to-video films. Quite like according to IMDb, it costs about $15 million, which is
yeah.
really high for this type of film. And also, while most of the world got it direct to video, it was actually released theatrically in Japan.
Yeah, so yeah, which is I think that's part of the model that Randall Emmett works with Seagal later on, where he doesn't release movies
Mm,
in Japan, but like in Eastern Europe, he would release movies theatrically
mm,
of Seagal's
yeah.
in Eastern Europe that are direct to video everywhere else as a way to sort of get some money back there. But yeah, I mean, 15 million is a lot because you think about like how you would make that money back. I mean, I guess beyond the fact that you could sell it to big chains like Blockbuster, and they would want a Seagal movie, and they would probably buy multiple copies of it. There was, I guess, you have like a TV edit that you can use, because I think that was part of the one of the other pieces of the trivia, right? Was that the director, who was just Mink, all lowercase
Mink.
letters, Mink. Yes,
Yes, yes.
right.
His real name's Christopher Morrison. He's a
Okay.
British music video director, but yes, he's just credited under his um oh no, I was going to say nom de plume, but that's only when you're like a writer. So
All
like I
right.
don't know what the filmic equivalent of that is.
Yes,
Would it still be a nom de plume,
it
or is
might
that just
be.
specifically for writing?
No, it might be. That's
I
a
don't
good
know.
point. It might
Yeah, I
be.
don't know.
Yeah, yeah. So according to, I think, Wikipedia or something like that, it
Uh-huh.
looks like nom de plume, even though it is supposed to be pen name for author, they do use it for directors as well. I guess the most common nom de plume is Alan Smithy. That's like, I guess, if a
Yes.
right, you know that.
If
Okay.
if somebody wants their name off the film, yes.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's not what Mink is doing here. Mink is not, Mink wants his name on. He just wants a different. He wants his nom de plume in the film.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Although I think that yeah, I guess I could have said I guess I could have just said alias, but like nom de plume I think is so fun to say. Like
Mhm.
it might make me, if it makes me pretentious, fair enough, but I just think it's fun to say. And I think like that Alan Smithy credit was actually retired after they did that movie, that
Oh.
that Burn Hollywood Burn, and Alan Smithy film.
Okay.
And they're like, so I think it was actually retired as a thing in the 2000s.
Ah.
I might be getting that wrong, but I believe that is correct.
Yeah.
Um, People can come and fact check me if I don't mind being fact checked. It's
Yeah.
okay, so I
No.
won't get offended.
Yes. No, no, yeah, we always appreciate that. Lately, 'cause, we've had people, kind of messing me on Facebook about certain things that, that I either, not that I necessarily missed, like I kind of surmised about, but wasn't sure. And like, oh
Yeah,
no, here's the answer. It's like, oh, excellent. This is great. And I can kind of plug it
right.
in a later episode. I guess it's like it's not a retraction. It's like, yeah, I guess it's kind of that thing, right? Where if like the newspaper says something wrong, a later issue of the newspaper says it was wrong. But I usually do
Yeah,
it in the
yeah,
cold
yeah,
open. I don't bury it in the
yeah.
fourth page or something like that.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Because
Yeah,
sometimes you do get that at like the end of an article where
yeah,
it's like, where it says it's edited. There's amendment.
right.
In the previous edition it said this, but we've now corrected it.
Yeah,
Um, for sure.
yeah,
I guess like we should kind of dive into the movie. We've
yeah.
I mean like I mean I think we've done a great job of atomizing that opening scene.
Right. Right.
Uh,
Well, right, because yeah, and I was going to quickly say about Mink was that he filmed this for theatrical release, and then Sony came in and said,
Mhm.
actually, no, we want to do direct to video more places. So I guess they had to change the aspect ratio to make it more TV friendly.
Yes.
Yeah,
No, I did see that in the trivia as well. And I guess I mean I can see why like I don't think this like for people listening, I don't think this is a good movie.
right,
But most of what makes it not a good movie is a lot to do with the script.
right.
Um like you know, so and I guess like in terms of like the whole like it not being a good movie, the director is involved in that. But I will say it cost $15 million, and I would say that you can. I think you can. Dodgy CGI aside, you can largely see the money on the screen. It's got a lot of location shots, you know, both in Thailand and Japan, which is expensive. Um, and you know, like again, I think we said this in the previous episode with Billy the Beast, that it very much looks like a movie. You know,
Mhm.
it doesn't look like they've cheaped out on anything really much. So it's it, you know, if you'd watched this in 2005, you'd probably think, "Oh, this looks a bit cheap."
Right.
But watching it in 2025, well, even in 2005, you might think this looks a bit more expensive than your normal direct to video.
Yeah.
Um, but watching it in 2025, this looks like a blockbuster compared to like direct to video now. Where like they really do cheap out and they're pumping things out that are, filmed in 8 days and made for $3 million or $2 million,
Right.
So this looks like a fucking like Mission Impossible film compared to like direct to video now,
Yes. Well, that's another piece of this with Seagal, right? So Seagal starts out at that time when you had companies like, I guess it's Columbia or Sony,
Yeah.
companies like that that were involved in the distribution who were putting a little bit more money into it. And part of that was they hadn't really crushed any of their competitors yet. So I think as the 2000s go on, they crush their competitors, but also I think as the 2000s go on, they don't see as much money in making direct to video, and it's almost like, well, we could make the same movie for 3 million that we made for 15. Why are we not making it for 3 million? And that's what they start doing. But there's this like little sweet spot here in the early part of the 2000s where we get these movies that they definitely have a higher floor
Yeah.
than what we get later, which makes it
Definitely in terms of like their visuals and stuff like that,
yes,
and definitely in terms of like, because it like you can criticize this film on many levels, but it does look nice.
right,
And it does, it's definitely visually appealing.
yeah,
And like the direction is very, he has a music video background. So like it's very music video, it's very mid 2000s, but I wouldn't say that it's bad.
no.
Like it's very of its time and like, comes off a bit goofy now, but I wouldn't say this is a terribly directed movie. There's other things about it that are pretty terrible, but like I wouldn't say that the direction is necessarily one of them.
No, no. Well, maybe we'll get stuck in on the very first thing that I think is terrible about this, and that
Sure.
is the politician. We have this xenophobic Japanese politician who's talking about removing all the foreigners from Japan, and he
Mhm.
gets assassinated. But it seems like he's popular, and there's really no mention. I guess I don't know if it's supposed to be backdrop to the Yakuza and Tongs teaming up. That there's this. I don't because they don't really get into this whole idea of xenophobia ever again in the rest of the movie, at least as far as I can tell. That like the issue with the Tongs and the Yakuza teaming up has nothing to do with xenophobia. It's more about like it being a criminal enterprise. It's even worse for other people involved. But I don't know about you. It seemed like this thread that they introduce and make it seem like it's going to be this huge part of the movie, but it never really happens
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, I think it's like a kind of I don't know how to describe it. I guess it's kind of like a false flag or something, like it's kind of there to like it's something that you think might be important, but actually
Right.
is not important. I guess like there is like a weird the internal politics of the film are quite strange.
Yeah.
Because like throughout the movie there is like weird nods to that. Like there is a scene we've not really introduced you, but like Seagal's character Travis gets a partner, Agent Mac, and they go to like a little cafe, and like Seagal gives this like little monologue about like, oh, this is, I grew up in Japan and this
Right.
is, my local hangout and stuff like that. And he's like, we used to, you wouldn't see that like even 10 years ago, like a Yakuza guy hanging out with like a Chinese guy. Um, and then later on, when he's talking to like Seagal's talking to one of the Yakuza bosses, Kojima, who the film seems to suggest we're supposed to kind of like, despite the
Right.
fact he's also Yakuza. And
Right.
like, one of the things that and that seems to be one of his complaints as well. Not only like is he complaining about the younger generation just don't care about like the kind or whatever, and like it's all just about money for them, and like he's not really happy with like them dealing heroin or just indiscriminately killing people. Like one of his complaints seems to be that he also deals with foreigners, so there's a very much a kind of Japanese superiority, Japan only, Japan first, kind of mentality from the because which I like. Strangely, the film seems to be quite soft on, and we're quite kind of like this is your friendly gangster that that you want to be your ally. So yeah, it's very strange. So there, I guess there is a thread of it throughout the movie, but it's not like a big part of the movie. It's just that you get these odd comments. Which again is interesting because there's not really any commentary on it from the film. We're just like let the racism of that go by because we're being told that the other people are worse, and in terms of their indiscriminate killing, I guess they are. But
Right.
like it is weird that one of the knocks on them is like Chinese and Japanese working together. And it's like, well, that seems like of all the bad things they're doing, that seems like a good thing, like,
Right.
you know, kind of being friendly to your neighbor and all that, like
Yeah.
yeah. So it was odd. It's odd on that level, the internal racial politics of the film. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah, yeah. It's kind of a fascinating thing. But this when this politician is killed, we find out William Atherton, who we saw in the opening scene, he is running a desk in Tokyo. Which I looked into this a little bit because I was curious about the U.S. CIA being in Japan, and apparently both Japan and the United States recognize that there are CIA activities or there's a CIA presence in Japan, and it's kind of like this thing they don't really talk about because I guess it's kind of like one of those things that sort of existed ever since after World War II. So
Post Second World War. Yeah.
yeah, and so I don't know if they would be in a kind of a fancy office. They wouldn't be there necessarily in like some kind of official offices, from what I can understand. But that's what they've got here. This is so for people listening. This is not a Millennium Films production. I don't, or maybe it is because it does have it has the same stunt double who's worked with him on previous films. But this is not the same CIA office that we see in a lot of these movies. This is not like the
No.
it's still like a one room thing. Like Atherton has his own nice office with a nice view of Tokyo, and then there's that like kind of closed off no windows room where all the conversations happen. So,
Yeah,
but
it's not I'm just looking up it's not. It's the production companies were Destination Films and
right,
Franchise Pictures, and then it was distributed by Sony Pictures Home Entertainment.
okay,
So like Millennium were not involved
that
in
makes
this
sense.
particular effort.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
Perfect. So we don't get the Millennium, Bulgarian studio CIA office set. But this is also like this is where we get introduced to Mac, who is played by Matthew Davis. I've seen Matthew Davis before in a movie called Shadow of Fear when I was on After Movie Diner for the Sleazy Spader
okay,
Springtime. That's a Spader movie, and I will say
okay.
Matthew Davis makes more sense in a Seagal direct-to-video movie than he does a '90s indie flick or early 2000s indie flick with Robin Tunney and James Spader and whoever else was in that movie.
Oh wow, cool. I've not seen that one. Is there a recommend there or no?
It's a weird it's a bit of a sell. It's a bit of a it's
Okay.
yeah it's interesting, but I don't know if I would recommend it. I don't know. I
You
mean,
don't recommend it.
yeah,
Okay, okay, fair enough.
yeah,
Yeah, no, he's not an actor I'm really familiar with. I looked him up. Apparently he's one of the kind of main people in the Vampire Diaries, which
yeah.
is a show I never watched. But I do recognize him. I do recognize him from Legally Blonde, which is
Yes.
about the only thing I recognize him from.
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, he fits here, right? And so he's like this green, fresh, FBI guy. And so while they're looking at the data, they realize like, hey, the Yakuza is involved here. Or actually, no, I think we get introduced to Matthew Davis later. I think it's just Atherton gets the conversation about the hit, and they find out it's Yakuza, and he's like, well, I know somebody I can call in about this, and he calls Seagal, and we also get with Seagal, we get introduced to who Seagal is after this whole situation. He's running a sword shop, and this is where they combine two of our favorite Seagal tropes. Right, we've got the
Yeah.
polyglot trope, and we've got the "you're the most amazing guy ever" trope. And the guy
Oh
who's
yes, when he goes to see, yeah, 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 yeah.
right,
No, no, absolutely, absolutely. I've just seen. I actually have seen Matthew Davis in other things,
okay,
because he was in Urban Legends Final Cut,
oh, that's
and
right,
also, what a 2005 Matthew Davis has. He was in this film and Blood Rain. Oh, what a year! What a year to be alive.
yeah. As much as we would make fun of you want to make fun of a Matthew Davis, but as the kids would say, in 2005 he was living his best life.
Goose left. That's amazing. Ah, jeez. Ah, I just that entertains me so much.
Yes,
Um, but yeah, no, he kind of fits here. He's got that kind of like he's like he's that kind of he seems like that kind of like generic white guy.
yeah.
He's got kind of like he's he's like entertaining. He's a bit bland, but he's like entertaining enough. He's got like kind of Chris O'Donnell energy.
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
It's kind of just there, It's kind of, yeah, he's a handsome fella. He's there.
yes. Which is kind of funny when you think about the fact that the Batman movies, when they turned the whole franchise over to Joel Schumacher, and they're like, "Who's our Robin going to be?" And they're like, "Oh, Chris O'Donnell," and it's like, yeah. He's gonna be there if that's what you want. Is someone who's just there. And yeah, with Batman Forever when he was, or Batman and Robin, where he's like, "Hey, I need more of a stake in this. I need to do or whatever." And it was like, no, you're Chris O'Donnell. You're supposed to just be there.
You're just hanging out, man.
Right,
Don't get too above your station.
right,
But no, I interrupted. Yes,
yes,
because like yeah, you were talking about that great scene with the sword salesman, and you're right. You're like it is the best because yes, we get Seagal showing off his Japanese, and then we got this guy like buttering him up and just saying like, oh, I'd give this up just for one lesson with you, and like you are like like you are one of the great sword masters, like the masters of old, like you just like going into a real soliloquy about like what a great samurai Seagal would have been, like
yes.
oh man, it just wanking him off. Like, I mean, and he was one of the writers of the screenplay, which makes it even worse. I
Right.
mean, he's the most ridiculous man.
Right. It is absolutely. It is. It's everything. Again, it's like what we see in these. Usually, these things get broken up, right? Usually, William Atherton is in the CIA office, and there's like a screen of Seagal, and they're talking about how
Yeah.
great he is, and then the polyglot scene is happening somewhere else. And I mean, I don't know if there's been a movie yet that we've watched that hasn't had either of those two. Hasn't had both of those at some point in them. I mean, he seems like he's always speaking a different language in one of these movies, and it
Yeah.
seems like he's always being told how great he is. The fact that it's almost like if Seagal's like, I need these things in every one of my movies, and they're like, well, what if we put them together here? And he's like, okay,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. No, I mean like uh no, I think like yeah, it does seem to be one that happens. These are the things that happen most frequently in a Seagal movie. Everybody has to tell him how great he is, and there has to be some file about like how great he is, and yeah, we're just bundling them all up in one in one lovely package, and like I mean. Like I say, it does make it even more ridiculous that like Seagal and like Seagal is one of the three writers on this movie.
Right.
The other being his
Well,
old pal Joe Halpin, who's done a number of these, and like a British guy called Trevor Miller, who apparently also wrote Out of Reach, which we've still to cover.
right.
Which is even more bonkers than this film. Fun fucking how.
Exactly.
We'll get there when we get there.
Oh, yes.
We've not got time. Anyway, yeah, no. It's so funny because like and like you get like it threaded throughout the movie where the other really funny one is he goes to see like a martial arts master. He goes to two martial arts masters, which seems redundant actually because like he doesn't get that much information from either of them. But he goes to the first one he goes to see who he calls Sifu is obviously there's one he calls Sifu, and then the other one he goes to see it's Sensei. So I presume so. The first one's Chinese, the other one's Japanese. Yeah, and like he sits down to see the Sifu, who we later, much later, towards the end of the film, find out is called Master Chung because like we don't hear that until like really towards the end of the movie.
Right.
And like he sits down, and Master Chung goes, "Ah, you look taller and younger." And I absolutely floored it. I was like, "Oh man, Seagal does it again."
Yes. Oh, it is amazing. And I mean, so that one there, right? So he goes to William Atherton. William Atherton lays it out like, "Hey, we need you to help us out." And of course, one of the best things too is when he goes to see Atherton, he walks through the metal detector and sets it off. And the guards there are kind of like, "Hey, you should stop." And then they just kind of let him go because he's Seagal, right? He just goes through the metal detector. Doesn't matter.
Absolutely. Nobody stops him. And I also love like that he's like the only guy. Like, cause like you know, like somebody higher up in the CIA who we don't see, we just hear on the phone, like phones William Atherton up and goes like, "Hey, do you have a guy that's an expert in the Yakuza?" And William Atherton's like, "Yeah, I know a guy."
Right.
And like, it's just like, what, Seagal's the only guy who knows anything about the Yakuza? I mean, like, it seems like you've got a bit of a presence in Japan, you know, like, you got a whole office, like, and Seagal's your only man?
Right.
What are you doing in Japan? Like, what, you know, like, it seems poor intelligence gathering if you've got no intelligence on the Yakuza apart from Seagal's character.
Right. Well, and then what I love is so he takes the job and he begrudgingly agrees to let Mac, Agent Mac, tag along. We found out he's an FBI agent, so that's another wrinkle in this, right? Is that Mac is an FBI guy, so he's like a little bit sort of outside of the CIA. But Seagal goes to the crime scene where the assassination happens, and he's just barking out orders. I need this. I need copies of all this. I need all this footage here. I need all this stuff. And the Japanese police guy there is like, sure, yeah, whatever you want. And we're like, wait, what? And then we get this CSI sequence where he's like, zoom in on that pendant there. And it's like, it looks like this blurry thing, this like blurry necklace around the assassin's neck in the first picture. And then like 3 zooms and suddenly it's this very clear picture of what the pendant is. It's just like, again, no irony at all in doing that. It's just like, hey, this is what we're doing here. And Seagal's like, boom, that's Yakuza, you know, and it's like, you know.
Actually, I think that's the pendant and notifies them that it's a tong.
That's right,
and
that's
that's
right, yes.
that's how he knows that the Yakuza guys are working with with the Chinese gangster, the Tongs. So yeah, that's what tips him off on that. And he's like, that's unusual. And so that's what tips him off that they're working together, the younger generation of gangster. Yeah. Nah, man, it's mad. It's mad. I mean, it's not the maddest thing that happens in this movie, but like, yeah, it's real funny. Um, I think like, yeah, I guess like, in these movies, like technology just works like that. Like you can just take a blurry picture and just make it super clear.
Yeah.
With the fantasy, because like I think it's like the CSI thing, where
Mhm.
CSI is like um it, like I apparently I remember reading actually that there's like a thing that like prosecutors talk about the CSI effect, because like CSI presents forensic science as wizardry.
Right.
Like people believe that that's how forensic science works, and it affects juries.
Right.
Like, because they're like, oh, why can't they just get DNA off of that, or why can't they just, or whatever, like they just think that like forensic science is more advanced or magic than it actually is, and it
Oh,
kind of distorts people's views in juries, particularly in the States. I remember reading. So like that's not great, but like, but yes, when you watch CSI and other programs like that, yeah, just remember it is very much fiction.
see, I always thought it was the other way because I thought it biased juries into believing anything. But I guess maybe
Yeah.
that's more of like the My Cousin Vinny effect, right? That like,
Yeah.
you,
Oh, but believing that, yes, like believing that, yes, I think that can also be like an impact on it, of like, because they because it's presented like wizardry, like they think it's always 100% accurate as well when they do like pull DNA off a thing, or like like it's, they think it's like, that's it, that's fact now.
right.
Where yeah, I guess like it can distort in that way as well. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the thing I always talk about with My Cousin Vinny that people never take away from that movie is the fact that two young men would have been executed for a crime they didn't commit because a guy who was supposed to be an expert on tire track impressions got it wrong. And if it hadn't been for the fact that Marissa Tomei had like some supernatural ability to understand tire tracks, right? And this knowledge to be able to pull it from anywhere because her dad was a mechanic, they would have died, and that there are plenty of people that
Mm.
do die because of, experts who give, expert testimony. I mean, my parents love watching those like true, those true crime shows or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'll watch them and they'll be like, oh, well, we figured out that they were at the scene because we were able to test their boots against the muck in the pond nearby. And it had the same, and I was like, how does that even work? And like, if you're like, who is, if you don't have a lawyer that's got like, if you're not spending enough on a lawyer who's got time to be like, why don't I bring in another expert who says, yeah, actually, there's 5 other ponds in the area that have the same chemical, have the same, makeup of bacteria. They could have been in another pond as well. But it's like people watch it and they're like, oh yeah, that's really good science they use there to pull that bacteria from the pond and say that's the same pond that was on his boots. And it's like, really, is that, is that science? Like, I don't know, because a guy
Yeah.
in a lab coat
I
told
know
me,
what you mean. I
yeah,
know what you mean. Like, and then like, but then that presents a philosophical question, Matt.
right,
It presents the question of like, how much trust do you put in experts? Because obviously, if you put too much trust in experts, like things can
right,
happen. People can die. But
right,
if you put not enough trust in experts, then like people are rejecting vaccinations and dying of curable diseases. So
yeah,
how much trust should we put in experts, Matt? That's
yes.
that's the question the world is asking you.
No. So to your point, I think what juries should have to do, if you're going to use the pond thing, right? It needs to the scientist who's determining that the pond and the boots have the same match. They need to write a paper, and that paper needs to be peer reviewed by 5 other pond bacteriologists who can then determine if it's right or not. I guess that's maybe the threshold that I should have, right? Is that,
Yes.
yeah,
No, I guess that's true. Everything should be like double and triple source. I guess like, yes, we should all just act like good journalists.
right,
Where like, like that's what, like when I was doing my journalism degree, that's what you were taught, that like basically that the best way to go about fact gathering a story is, whenever you're kind of talking to a source, then you try and get that, what they say, verified by at
right,
least 2 other sources.
yeah, yeah. No,
So you should have like at least 3 sources on any given fact. And
Right? Because then it's like, okay, if 3 other scientists look at the data and say, yeah, you know what, I think that could be the same mud from that pond, then it's like, okay, I'm more willing to believe it.
on the balance of probability, it's probably right. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, exactly. But you make a great point that like people, they watch these shows. I mean, they say that like pro attitudes towards the police go. You know, the people have more positive attitudes towards the police because they watch a lot of Law and Order, and it's like. You know, like when you see like Stabler, like, you know, spitting in Matthew Modine's face in an episode of SVU or something like that, and you're like, yeah, you know, go get him, get the bad guy, and it's like, yeah, but police officers do that when it's not the bad guy because they're forcing a confession out of them, and it's like, you know, it's not, you know, you're not supposed to. That's why you don't do that, because people confess to things that they don't want to because they don't want to get spit on and beaten. You know, it's
I think like that is an interesting thing because like I'm like I'm very you know like I'm gonna make a controversial admission maybe, but like I'm very much not pro police, which you
right.
might have guessed, but you know. However, like I think like you know watching this type of movie or watching like the films that are tend to be bracketed as kind of propaganda, whether that is like the really good versions of that, like you know Lethal Weapon, Dirty Harry, Die Hard, you know whatever. Um, I think there is like it does bring out like an emotional response for you. Like even somebody like me who's like very left wing and very suspicious of the police generally and the type of people who tend to join the police. Um you know like when you get watching those films, particularly good ones, you do get emotionally. There is like an emotional response there to like you're supporting the hero, and then often you might think about that film in in retrospect and think like, oh, that they are poster boys for police brutality, and like and you're cheering against the human rights lawyer
Right.
and like the internal affairs guy and all that kind of stuff, which in real life you would be like, yeah, no, those checks and balances are very much needed, and like but for those 90 minutes you're like, yeah, fuck that human rights lawyer
Right.
and his liberal pussy ways, like
Right. Well, because that was a big part of that, that propaganda. It was a big part of grooming us Americans in the 90s to vote for things like mandatory minimums, or vote for politicians who were pushing for things like mandatory minimums, and, being, the war on drugs and all of that. Now, I remember watching a movie on the Exploding Helicopter podcast called Last of the Finest, where there's a sequence where they bulldoze a crack dealer's, like a crack house. And it's like this huge thing about, they're taking out the crack den, all that stuff. Well, I remember in the 90s, like the LAPD, like bulldozing houses, and it's like, oh, look at us, we're taking down the crack. And it's like, no, you're bulldozing people's houses. Like, you don't even know who's living, that kind of thing. But I realized that, like, this movie, Last of the Finest, I think it was like a TV movie that was on, here, broadcast TV here in America. It's like they're telling you, they're grooming you so that when you see these news reports of police brutality, you think, no, they're just out there trying to fight the good fight,
Oh yeah. No,
yeah.
they absolutely you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
They're absolutely grooming you.
Yeah.
And like this is the interesting. I before we get back to the we will get back to the movie
Yes,
and tune in after these breaks. Like the last thing I'll say before we get back to the movie is like it is interesting because like people, particularly people on the kind of right wing or whatever, the kind of people who watch Fox News or whatever, they think of like Hollywood as being like it's super woke,
right.
it's super left, it's Marxist, it's this, it's that, whatever. And like I would say when it comes to like social politics, when it comes to things like gender and identity and race, they haven't always been woke, but like particularly over the last kind of decade, they have been more woke, and like I guess like in a very kind of white liberal way, that like Hollywood has always been kind of liberal and kind of like progressive issues. But if you look at it, Hollywood is also really quite conservative when it comes to law enforcement and the military, and America's foreign misadventures in various countries and stuff like that. So like I think that like Hollywood's like not as left wing as people think it is, particularly when it comes to anything to do with cops, the FBI, or the army, where I think it's quite conservative.
Right, and they've always had a close connection with those people, right? Because you would use police officers for your movies. You know the army would like there were situations I've read about where like if maybe somebody had like an anti like war stance on whatever conflict the U.S. was in, that the military wouldn't allow their services or like use of their vehicles or something for a certain movie if a director came out against, say, the Iraq War or something like that. And so that's another piece of it, right? Is that the studios are like, no, stay on their good side because, hey, maybe we need some Navy SEALs for this movie we're going to be doing here. Don't upset the military on that. So you're right. It's like it's always been more conservative. I think it's always been kind of conservative in a lot of ways like that. I mean, I remember Michael Jai White in an interview said a producer once said to him, "I wish there was a white you." And it's like, can you imagine, like, in any other line of work, any other kind of thing, saying that kind of thing? But there's almost this almost like this hiding behind this concept of this is what the audience wants, kind of thing, right?
Definitely,
Yeah,
definitely, definitely a lot of that, and like I have to say, like doing my podcast, covering '90s action movies, like as you like, you don't. I didn't notice it growing up. Like, I didn't notice like watching movies just how white movies were
yeah,
growing up, like mainstream Hollywood movies, and how there was this segregation, and how like most of the black movies would be like ghetto movies or whatever,
yeah,
like that would be your movies where predominant black cast or whatever. Um, and then it's only like watching movies regularly now and like the kind of more multicultural cast that are just as standard that you just don't think about. It's like, of course they have a multiracial cast. Yeah. And then you go back and watch a bunch of '90s movies and you're like, wow, movies up until like 10, 15 years ago were really, really white.
yes. Yeah, it's amazing. So I think to your point, it's like, or to I guess both points that we make is that Hollywood is not like this whole woke thing that we think it is. It's definitely. I mean, another example I think would be the Eternals, where they lost a lot of money by having a gay character in that movie, where they had a gay couple that had adopted a child as well, and China wouldn't show the movie because Chloe Zhao, I think it said stuff about the Chinese regime, but then no countries in the Middle East would show that movie because of that.
Mm.
And so it's when Disney took a stand on it and said we're going to make the movie and make the money, and then I think there's a point where they're starting to look at it and be like, and I think that it's going to change a little bit. And I think it's something that we maybe we watch out for. Is like, does Disney become a little less of what the conservatives call woke, right? And if they feel like the money isn't there for that kind of thing.
Well, yeah, I think we've already seen that, like, in the start of like Donald Trump's second term, where
Right.
like a lot of these companies, have really shown their true face, and like
Yes.
and like the face that they always had, which is like they're all about profit, they're all about
Yes.
money. So like if they think the popular consensus is behind, this is very much more of an American thing, like the whole DEI thing, and
Yeah.
like it's called different things in different countries, but
Right.
in America it's called DEI, so like
Yeah.
I will go with that. So like if they think the popular consensus is behind such a thing, then they will do such a thing and they will have diversity policies.
Yeah.
But if they think the popular consensus is swinging, then they will just drop it because like they don't care. Like that's the bottom line. They don't care. They care about the public perception of like of what the public is invested in. And if they think there's a public perception in doing kind of social justice things, or supporting Black Lives Matter or supporting Pride Month, then they will do those things because then because it will fatten their profit margins.
Yeah.
If they think it's not going to fatten their profit margins, as we've seen many companies drop all these things, drop initiatives, DEI initiatives, drops things to do that in connection with Pride Month or Black History Month or whatever, then yeah, that's the thing. They'll just go with whatever they think the popular consensus is. So like, and they'll just. And a lot of them are, maybe pretending to be woke, but are actually deeply conservative, and are now happy to show their kind of wave their conservative flag. Now that it's okay to be racist out in the open, yeah. I guess, yeah, that's my little rant. I guess we should go back to
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah. No, but I think you're right, especially here in America with these tech companies. I think the other thing too is that they were promoting the DEI thing because they thought that Gen Z liked that, and now they've realized because the economy's so bad, and also with AI and stuff like that, it's like we don't need Gen Z anymore. So who cares? I think that's probably another cynical part of this that unfortunately, they decided that Gen Z's dollars weren't as worth it to them. So, but yeah, but like you said, where Seagal, with his CSI tactics, has figured out that the Tong is involved. He goes and sees his buddy in Chinatown. But then we also get introduced to our baddies here. We get introduced to Kuroda and his two henchmen. Plus, the other guy is Chan, I think, right? Is the or Chen, I think.
Chen.
That's
Chen.
right. Yeah, he's the Tong leader, and so we get a sense of how bad.
And I mean, I think we should point out for Hong Kong action movie fans, Chen is played by Ken Lo, who used to be part of the Jackie Chan stunt team, and is a character is an actor in many different Jackie Chan films, including he played the villain in Drunken Master 2, but like he's in a couple of the police stories. He's in a whole bunch of Jackie Chan films, as well as many other things. And he's a very good martial artist and very good on-screen martial artist, and just like a fun actor as well. Kind of doing a bit of scenery chewing as the other villains as well do. And we'll get more into that in a bit.
No, and I wonder actually, now that you mention it, because we were talking about something that happens in this movie later on when Chen and Seagal fight, and Chen's able to throw Seagal through a coffee table. I wonder if that was Seagal respecting him and saying,
possibly, because and maybe, I don't know if it's like a Seagal choice or like a producer choice, because I mean, Ken Lo's maybe not like a megastar or anything, but he's like a known person in Hong Kong cinema. So for the Asian market, that's going to get like a pop when it comes in. And like the thing that throws him into the coffee table is like he does this he kind of springs himself off a bar, and he does this kind of jump kick that looks real cool.
Yes.
And I think like it is, it's one of those things. It's a little disappointing because I've seen Ken Lo in a bunch of other films and know his like full capabilities. It would have been fun to see like an even bigger fight or an even more even fight. But as we know with Seagal's ego, like if you get like one good hit on them, that is like that you've reached like kind of godlike levels. Because most people just get destroyed with it. Like I think like this fight he has with Ken Lo Ken Lo gets absolutely trashed by him, but by Seagal standards, it's like the closest fight, one of the closest fight. It's up there with his fight with Everett McGill in Under Siege 2 as one of his closest fights compared to your usual just Seagal just throws a guy about and just ragdolls him,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's I mean, and I guess also we get like this sort of this interesting duality thing with the Tongs, where they're doing this bloodletting ritual, and to guess show that they're on board, while Kuroda, our Yakuza baddie with his guys, they go to where the assassins are and act like, hey, we're gonna have a celebratory beer, and then just decide to wipe them all out, right? And that's, I guess, how we know how bad they are, right? That they're just gonna kill everybody there.
I think that's like a key action movie trope,
right?
It's like how evil your villain is, if he's like totally cool, was just killing anybody, including his own men,
right?
Or including allies to his gang, or just his own men. And like very much Kuroda is in that subgenre of villain, of just like he's fully 100% pure born evil, and like, to the extent he is one of those kind of like slightly cartoonish villains, where you're like, why does anybody work for this guy? Like he's got this hair trigger temper, he just kills people randomly. Like you could be next tomorrow if he wakes up on the wrong side of the bed. Like it's like, how did he manage to get the loyalty of any of these guys?
Right, right, exactly. And I mean, so his two main guys, right? He's got one guy who looks a little bit older, and then the younger guy, always has this like wide-eyed, kind of crazy stare on him. And the joke I made at the time when I wrote the review was I compared him to
Mhm.
this tabloid figure, the runaway bride, which was there was this tabloid story that was kind of big in the news at the time. This woman had
Mhm.
she was supposed to get married and she just ran off, and I don't remember if she
Mhm.
said she was kidnapped initially, but then just suddenly it was
Mhm.
that she'd run away. But all the pictures of her had this big wide-eyed stare, and I was like, oh, why does this guy look like the runaway bride? But they're
That's really funny.
yeah, and so they're kind of wacky as well. So it's I think with these baddies, right? Like you said, like Kuroda is kind of like that scenery chewing, like yeah, like why would anybody work for him kind of baddie. Um, but it's also, I guess, it's also they try to make him. It's funny because he's kind of a fun baddie if it wasn't for the just indiscriminately killing people. I think.
I think so. It is interesting, like how the film is set up, because I would say that like the kind of other older Yakuza bosses are kind of just typical generic kind of Yakuza gangster
Yeah.
characters or whatever. Um, and the Chinese gangsters led by Chen are an interesting bunch, but they're over the top in this way that is like typical of if you've watched like a whole lot of Hong Kong action cinema,
Yeah.
like that's the way they're over the top. But the Kuroda and his two allies, who I didn't pick up their names, and I just referred to them in my notes as the older guy as Shades,
Yeah.
and because he always wears these orange shades, and the younger guy is Cowboy Hat guy
Yes, I
because
was gonna
he
say
wears a
cowboy
cowboy
hat. Yes.
hat. So like Shades and Cowboy Hat guy, like these three are like interesting because they're over the top in like a weird way,
Yes.
and like the thing that made me think of is like, and the rest of the characters don't feel like this. The rest of the characters feel like a kind of standard Seagal action movie, but these three characters feel like very much like they come from a Takeshi Miike film. They
Yes.
very much feel like they've walked out a Dead or Alive movie
Yes. Yeah.
and somehow ended up in this movie, and we're not sure how, but they've wandered onto the wrong set.
Right.
Like a Takeshi Miike movie was being made across the road, and they've somehow ended up in this movie. Like
Yes. No, that's a really great point because there's, when I think of like Yakuza for myself, it's older stuff like Seijin
yeah,
Suzuki kind of movies. And this is
yeah,
not that at all. This is no Joe Shishido kind of thing. But you're absolutely right. Takashi Miike, that's really where this goes. Yeah, it is kind of interesting. Like, I mean, the way that the Kuroda, like he wears his coat just over his shoulders and he's got his slick back hair and he's smoking his cigarettes. And I mean, there's a sequence that comes after. So maybe we'll break into a couple of these sequences here. I mean, there's the
oh yeah, I love the way he's styled. Like
yes,
that's fantastic. And he wears
yeah,
the kind of that kind of that kind of mottled vest and stuff as
yes,
well, like under his jacket. And oh yeah, yeah. I mean, like it's great. I mean, he like as much as he is pure evil, he does look very cool.
he does. He does. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. He's great. Yeah. I think that's the thing is I think they had to make him indiscriminately evil. Otherwise, we would have looked at him and been like, this guy's so cool. Like, we'd rather have him win instead of Seagal. But
That is true.
yeah,
They were like, we need to turn this guy's evil up to 11 because otherwise people are going to support this guy
yeah.
and this cool slick back hair.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I always call it myself. I always call it the Destro effect because when I used to watch
Yeah.
GI Joe as a kid, I always wanted Destro to win because I thought he was so cool. So
Yeah.
yeah,
No, 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 no.
yeah,
Like, and it's like, yeah, I mean, what do you want? If he wasn't so evil, you still want him to die because he's really, really evil. He's
yeah,
turned up to 11. Him and his goons, and he's indiscriminately killing people, and like, he kills like the allies that we do care about and stuff like that. otherwise, yeah, I do think it would get into that kind of destro territory, because he's just a very handsome guy as well. So you got like a very cool, stylized, kind of dreamy villain.
Yeah.
Exactly.
He's everything that Seagal is not. It really
Yes.
is what it is, right? It's so like
yes, he's charismatic.
Yeah.
He can act emotions out. Like
he dresses well. He looks cool. All of this.
Yeah, he looks impeccable. He's very much. And Seagal is trying very hard to be cool in this movie, because like you say, he's wearing his like floor length Matrix jacket throughout the film. Like once we get out of the do-rag opening scene, it's the Matrix jacket for the rest of the movie, and and he has the slick back here as well. This is still when Seagal slick back, and he has the ponytail, right?
Yes, he does. Yeah.
Yes.
The ponytail.
Is this supposed to be one of the last movies he has the ponytail, right?
Right. He still has enough hair for it. I mean, he's like in his mid-50s here, and he's got enough hair. No goatee at this point, but he's got enough hair for the slick back.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, one of the tropes we always talk about is the cultural appropriation, and I think what's great about this is when he, with the other character, I keep Matthew Davis. Like I know his first name is Matthew, but I keep forgetting his last name. But Matthew Davis, when he tags along that juxtaposition of Seagal as the cultural appropriator who's completely at ease in this Japanese culture or the Chinese culture, and he knows exactly what he's supposed to say at all times, and he says it in their language, and he knows all the customs and all of that, versus the fish out of water Matthew Davis, right, who can't use chopsticks, and doesn't know when the guy asks him what school, because he's supposed to pretend he's a martial artist, and he says he's like UCLA because he doesn't but it is again that trope of Seagal can be any culture at any time.
Yeah, no, he seamlessly, makes his way into any culture globally, and like you say, the kind of polyglot thing of like, of course he speaks Chinese, he speaks Japanese, he can speak all the languages, and he apart from being a Yakuza expert, of course he's also an expert on the Tongs and Chinese gangsters as well, because why would he only have the one speciality? Obviously he knows what all the Asian gangsters are about, and he probably even knows what the other, he probably even knows about the Myanmar, ones over in the triangle. I'm sure he knows all about that as well. It's classic Seagal. I mean, like in every sense. Seagal's paws are all over this picture, because not only did he star, with most of his films, he also produced. He's one of the 3 writers, and yes, and also I noticed, and this is really skimming ahead, but we get not 1, not 2, not even 3, but 4 whole songs on the soundtrack from Seagal. Including the end credit song. So he's very much all over, and I guess at least that means he looks like he's putting in slightly more effort than his usual. Can I just sit in a big chair, please? So it looks, it's one of the projects that he seemed to actually care a little bit about. But so you also noticed that we got 4 cuts from that classic album, Songs from the Crystal Cave.
I mean, the end credit one is the best, because it's just
it's so good. It's hilarious.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah. People, if you're listening to this podcast, you could pause it right now. Go and listen to "Don't You Cry" by Steven Seagal, and then come back, and you'll know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, the movie's on Tubi, so you could actually pause this, fire up on Tubi, just go to the end credits.
Just scroll to the end credits.
And just watch the end credits. I mean, you got to be careful, because Tubi might try to turn something else on for you. Just keep that in mind. You say you want to skip because you want to. This is the time you want to listen to the end credits. You want to see the credits.
That is true. That is true. Because I did that. It said, "Do you want to now watch A Dangerous Man?" But I was like, no. No. I'll stay here for the end credits.
Yeah.
We've still got a Dangerous Demand to cover on another episode, so
Exactly. Exactly.
it's okay, Tubi. You just chill out there.
Yeah, just relax for now, Tubi. We'll get to it. Don't you worry, Tubi. We'll be there at some point. Exactly. Yeah. Now the sequence. I guess maybe we should go to the coffee shop sequence, right? Because that's where you were talking about earlier, where Seagal was talking about how he grew up in that area. Because apparently somebody was saying that they shot in the area where his dojo was. So it actually.
Yeah, I read that in the trivia as well. Like
Yeah.
that cafe was in the original street where, like, before he like moved back to America. Because like if if people listening to this podcast probably know about the Seagal mythology or whatever,
Right.
but if you're not a fay with the Seagal mythology, according to his own record, he was the first white person to open an Aikido dojo in Japan, which seems like it might be true.
Right.
What is less verifiably true is like he claims that he was like working with the CIA
Right.
and like had some run-ins with the Yakuza and had to like leg it out of Japan because he had like beef with the Yakuza or whatever, and the Yakuza were like, he was like, public enemy number one or whatever.
Right.
Which seems like it might be like a bit of a Steven Seagal fantasy, that part of it. But anyway, so like, yes, that cuts into the grand. I love how like all it, yeah, I mean, it is like his whole body of work just all seeps into like his own personal mythology. It's not even like an acting career as such. It's just like he's just creating his own person. He's like his own character,
Yes.
creating this, and like, it's like Steven Seagal films are like watching a fictional character. It's like watching the further adventures of Sherlock Holmes or something. It's just like he is his own character. He has created his own mythology and his own universe. Yeah, no, it's all very strange, but yes. Anyway, yes, I read that also.
Yeah.
That was a very long way to say that.
Yeah. No. And so and he says like I grew up here, which that doesn't like what does that mean? But he's essentially trying to tell Matthew Davis what the score is and all this stuff, and that's when the kid. So I forgot to mention actually before they're going into the cafe, he bumps into a young kid. And the kid, says, "Hey, round eyes, get out of my way," and all this stuff like that. And Seagal's like, "What?"
I loved round eyes as an insult. That made me laugh. I
Yes.
was like, oh, that's very funny. I guess like I wonder if that is an insult
It
in
is.
Japan. Like
Yes.
like I like that they have like the inverse of like the white person insult.
Right.
Like that's that amused me. I was like, oh, that's that. I mean, I guess it's not fun, like in the sense of like no racism is good racism, but like, but I just thought like, oh, they've just done the mirror opposite. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But I think let's see. Is it the word? Is it gaijin? Is that the meaning? Is that the word that means it means outsider or alien? But I thought my friend said that it literally
no, I
means
know because
round out. Maybe I'm wrong.
right. Yeah, because I knew that the gaijin just meant like outsider, foreigner. Like whatever, and it's often referred. They often refer white people as that.
Yeah.
I know that. Funnily enough, I know that because I am a fan of professional wrestling.
Oh yes.
And like they often get referred to when people go over
Yes.
there to tours and stuff like that.
Yes. No, that makes sense. Yeah, because right. Yeah, because the Japanese wrestling culture. Yeah, I was kind of forgetting about that myself. That's right. Yeah, yeah, especially like you said when Americans go over there and wrestle.
Yes. Yeah. No. Absolutely. And then like because like racism is inherent in all professional wrestling. So like much like the foreign invader character is a big thing in American wrestling or whatever. The foreign invader character is traditionally less so now. Like wrestling's a bit has changed in kind of in the last 20 years. So like there's less of that kind of trope of like the foreign invader character in professional wrestling, but there's a long history of that type of character, both in American wrestling and Japanese wrestling. I guess like in wrestling, professional wrestling, the world over. We've gone on some interesting detours in this episode.
Yeah. But
That like I
know,
hope that the listeners appreciate. Again, I apologize if we're going too far off track.
yes.
Like this.
Yes, no way. Because this is, the guy says the literally, round as word. He's like this young kid, shaved head. And the only reason why I'm bringing him up is because there's two interesting things that happen both here and then in a later scene with this guy, and also with the other character that I wanted to mention. So
Mm-hmm.
first off, this guy, after he bumps into him, he comes back with his gang of guys, and that's when Seagal makes the comment like, "Oh, look, it's a Yakuza guy with a couple Chinese guys hanging out with him. You wouldn't have seen this 10, 15 years ago." But Seagal beats the crap out of them. But in the process of him beating the crap out of them, Matthew Davis goes to pull his gun and it goes off. And Seagal first says, "What? You just accidentally discharged in public?" But then he calls it an AD. And I wonder if he got the term AD from like his cop friends. I feel like that's like but you're like, maybe he's just hanging out with these cop friends and one of them referred to accidental discharge as an AD. And he's like, "Oh, I got to call it an AD now," because later on in the movie, he also, when Matthew Davis goes out on some kind of mission or something, he's like, "Yeah, make sure you don't have any more ADs," and so I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, no, I think that is kind of funny, and also like, yeah, I think that maybe is like because the his fellow screenwriter Joel Halpin,
Mm.
um, I think that like if I'm remembering correctly, I think he was like a cop at one point in time
Oh, I
before
think you're
becoming a
right.
screenwriter. Um, but I may be getting that wrong, but like yeah. But anyway, I know that obviously, yes, obviously, with Lawman and all that. Uh, yeah, well, according to Joe Halpin's trivia, he did work as an undercover narcotics detective for Los Angeles Sheriff Department.
Yeah.
So, I mean, unless he's also like a Seagal type fantasist and that's made up, I don't know.
Right.
But
Right.
but as far as we are aware,
Yeah.
Halpin might have been a detective.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and then obviously, yeah, through his lawman connections, he probably got that from there. I think like this scene is like good to highlight as well, because I guess we've kind of danced around it, but like this is a film that's a really interesting film because like a lot happens and nothing happens.
Yes.
Um, and like this street market fight is like kind of what we want from a Seagal movie. He's like throwing people into the various kind of food stands and stuff like that. And then he's breaking people's wrists and he's doing all the Seagal stuff that you want. But you don't get like a massive amount of that. And like what you do get for most of the film, once you've kind of had that like first 20 minutes where we kind of realize who the bad guys are, um, uh, uh, there is a big section of the film, like probably almost an hour of the film. Well, maybe not as much as an hour, but at least like maybe 45 minutes, where in the middle, where it's just meetings, just
Yes.
people having meetings.
Yes.
And like, like that can be interesting, like, if it's an interesting detective story or a spy thriller, and like kind of these kind of dialogue scenes where you're kind of further burrowing into the conspiracy of this or that or whatever. But it doesn't work like that here because the writing's not good enough. And so it feels very haphazard and feels very slipshod, and a lot of the meetings don't add up to much, and he doesn't get much information out of them. But like he literally is just going about town, kind of meeting people. Like he has like a woman that we find out he's in love with,
Yes.
which is very random.
Yes.
That he meets, who's the owner of a nightclub called Fusion.
Yeah.
He also knows like a tattoo guy. He knows two martial art masters, and he also gets a meeting with Kojima, who's this old Yakuza guy as well. And then while he's having meetings, the bad guys are also having meetings. And like they're having meetings between themselves. Just each gang is having meetings. The Chinese gang and the Japanese gang, they have meetings together. They have meetings with the Burmese gang. Like, and they have all sorts of configurations of meetings. So you're just watching various scenes in like restaurants, cafes, and nightclubs,
Warehouses.
where oh yeah, and the houses, where people are just having meetings, talking about what they might do and their plans and stuff like that, and not really seeing any of the uh, a lot of the execution of those plans, or very brief snippets of the execution of those plans, and like yeah, and I mean, some of the meetings seem very um extraneous, like they really don't need to be there. Like, I mean, I get it, maybe, like with the two martial art masters that you're seeing, visiting one Chinese one Japanese one for different connections, I guess. But I mean, like, they don't go far. I mean, he doesn't really get much from the Japanese sensei, who the one who quizzes Matthew Davis's character um, about like what he's a martial arts student in, and where he was training and stuff like that. And Yeah, some are just like do nothing at all, because like there's a second meeting between him and the Japanese sensei in like a restaurant, that is just like a 2-second scene, and he's just like, hey, all right, see you later, and then that's it, and you're like, what did they get out of that at all? Like, so there's certain scenes that are just really random, and then there's other characters that are like, he also has a meeting with this character who's like following him, and I don't know, like, it seems like that character, her character name is Jewel. It seems like her character maybe got like most of her scenes cut or something, because it seems like maybe she has like an entire subplot that's just not there, but they've included just enough to annoy the viewer of being like, it looks like there's more there. Why did you still include this tiny little bit of it, where you could either just include the subplot or just get rid of her character? Like, so they make a lot of odd choices like that. But yes, so I think like that's why it feels like there's a lot to talk about in terms of actual plot, because you get tons of exposition, just reams of exposition. But when you boil down to it, there's not actually a lot to talk about, because like a lot of the meetings don't actually affect anything, and you're just watching a series of quite dull meetings for a lot of the movie.
Right. Well, and it's like a lot of these characters, like you said, like the Jewel character, these characters get introduced and we feel like it's going to be important for us to know who they are. But really what it is it's just bogging down the movie with more stuff. Right. With the Jewel character, she's supposed to, Atherton has hired her to follow him, to follow Seagal, keep an
Mm-hmm.
eye on him. He like sneaks into her apartment at one point, but it's not really clear that like I thought he was sneaking into the girlfriend's apartment. And I was like, why would he break into his own girlfriend's apartment? That seems weird that he'd break in it. And then I realized,
Yeah.
like, oh no, it's this Jewel character. And it's almost like we get a sequence because she gets out of the shower and she's just wearing a towel, I think. And so it's
I
almost
think
like
that is why we get that sequence. I think
right,
is just because like yeah, because we get this like kind of cutting between uh the and again, it's disorientating at first, because the camera is following the back of Seagal, so obviously
yeah.
it's a stunt double that doesn't really look like Seagal. So at first you're like, who is this character? And you're like, oh yeah, it's supposed to be Travis. And then we're cutting between that and then going back, and we cut a couple of times to her just being in the shower, and you don't really see anything because she's kind of behind the glass, so you're just seeing kind of, she's naked there, but you're not seeing too much, but you are seeing something, and like that. So it's trying to kind of have its cake and eat it there. So yeah, I think because like, again, I think maybe we should mention that this is a movie that definitely there's I guess there's a sliding scale in these direct-to-video movies, but the women in the movie don't get treated well, and none of them are given really anything to do. and most of them are just treated purely as sex objects. Um, outside of uh kind of Nico, but even she's kind of treated as sex object, and like the Miley is the
Yeah.
only one who's kind of not treated as that. And then even she's kind of like this kind of trope of like this kind of silent, deadly Japanese woman.
Right.
Or no, I guess maybe no, I
She's
guess maybe
Chinese.
because
Yeah.
she's Chinese. She's
Right.
Chinese because she's the student of the Sifu, so she's
Yeah.
Chinese. So silent Japan, deadly Chinese one.
Right.
Um,
Well,
um,
like kind of like even though
yeah.
they don't
So
use any wire work, there is sort of like a I don't maybe not a crouching tiger, hidden dragon kind of thing with her, but it's like a that idea, right? Like she's kind of in the tradition of like a Michelle Yeoh or Shi Yi or something like that.
yeah,
Yeah,
no, that's true because she is kind of like because she's also dressed like quite traditionally and stuff like that. So again she doesn't look like kind of she's not wearing kind of modern clothes. She is more wearing kind of like the type of outfits you're more familiar with in films like Crouching Tiger or House of Flying Daggers or something like that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I don't know who Shi Yi is. I was thinking of Ji Yi Yang as a character. I was the actor that I was thinking of.
Mm.
Yeah, Ji Yi Yang, who was also in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. But yeah, it's. I think the other thing I would say too, talking about like some of these scenes that we're getting here. I think also it's more of like stroking Seagal's ego for these scenes, right? Like, oh,
A lot of them, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
like for example, when they meet the they meet the sensei that first time, it's during some big geisha thing that these Japanese businessmen are doing, and it's like, oh, look at me, Mr. Seagal, right at home with these Japanese businessmen at this geisha, thing, and, drinking my sake and doing all this stuff, and it's like, look at how cool I am doing that, and it seems like a lot of scenes are that kind of thing too, and so again, it's like how much, that scene, all the sensei does is tell him like, oh, go talk to Yojima or a Kojima or something like that. And it's really that's all it is. He gives him the name of the Yakuza guy, but like
Mm.
we go through all of this sort of like, look at how cool I am. Look at me talking with you. We're doing all this great stuff. Hey, all this stuff. Oh, I got to take a phone call from William Atherton. Let's see how much of a fish out of water Matthew Davis is when he talks to the sensei. He doesn't know what he's talking about, but Seagal, he's so cool and everything. And like you said, it's like we're adding too many characters. We're adding all these plot points that mean absolutely nothing or don't really further the film or don't really need to further the movie, but also that we can stroke Seagal's ego, right? We're just layering all this stuff on just to make Seagal feel like he's more of a cool guy, and so it's kind of funny to see it happen this way in this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like definitely it feels like we could have got to Kojima. It seems like Naiko has like Yakuza contacts.
Yes.
And like it seems like we easily could have got to Kojima through her.
Yeah.
So like the extra scene that that we get with the sensei, the extended one, and then the later one, which is a total nothing scene.
Yes.
Yeah, again, just feel extraneous, and they just don't need to be there. And like, yeah, there is these kind of characters who are kind of set up, and they look like they're going to mean something, but often, like you say, they just don't. And like even at the end, where like Seagal's character, we should say, I guess we maybe didn't mention his character's name's Travis Hunter,
Right. Yes.
and he teams up with like these other two characters at the end that are kind of his friends, this tattoo artist guy, and also Miley, um, and like again, those characters are kind of presented in that kind of like final section, like that last 20 minutes or whatever it is, as if they've been like key allies throughout the movie, and yet you're kind of like, he went to see them a couple of times, but like it's not like they were a big part of the film up until now, but now you're being presented as like, yeah, these are like main characters, and you're like, are they?
Right.
Okay, I thought they were just kind of random side characters.
Yeah.
Like the only other times we saw Miley before this is like she said, "Oh, I'm so pleased to see you after all these years," when they first met the Sifu, and then he got her to deliver a letter, and that was it. Like I like,
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, like they say something about like her being like his shield or protector, but
Yeah.
again, like you said, it's something that's just mentioned in this one-off scene with the Sifu, and we never hear about it again. So then it's like when they bring it at the end, it's like, oh, that's the thing. And then, like you said, this whole thing with the tattoo artist being like, oh yeah, his family was killed by Kuroda, so he wants revenge. And they just kind of, it's like we're at like hour 20, hour 30 or something like this of the movie. Well, the movie was like an hour and 38 minutes, so it would have been like hour 20, 25. That suddenly it's like,
Mm.
oh, by the way, the tattoo artist's family was killed by Kuroda and he wants revenge, so he's going to join Steven Seagal in this big end thing where they invade the temple that Kuroda has taken over. Just kind of, like you said, it's just kind of like a, oh, by the way kind of deal.
Yeah, a lot of things are just kind of thrown off at us, like it's just in a way that feels pretty unsatisfying. So I think that's a frustrating thing about the movie because like there's parts to this movie that I kind of enjoy, as part of, like I mentioned earlier, I like the look of the movie.
Yeah.
Like there is a nostalgia to all the kind of mid 2000s whooshy editing and that kind of, music video kind of thing that it's obviously doing. Some of the fights are quite good. Like, in terms of like what you want from a Seagal fight, him just kind of ragdolling people or whatever and breaking wrists and throwing people through glass or whatever. Like the fight in the street market's pretty good. The fight with Ken Lo is pretty good. The end surf fight with Kuroda is fun. But like it just and there and there is like kind of fun moments and like watching like Kuroda and Chen kind of like kind of one up each other on who's like.
Oh, right. So yeah. So
Okay.
sorry, we had a technical difficulty where we got disconnected from Jitsi, but you were saying that Chen and Kuroda were kind of one upping each other.
Yes. So I guess like I was saying, like, of all the kind of meetings, and I know I've said the word meetings a lot in the last kind of um 10, 15 minutes of the podcast.
Right.
But of all the kind of these things, like that's kind of the most fun element of like, watching like Jen and Kuroda kind of one each other in kind of like, I'm the most insane villain. No, I am the most insane villain. Because at first it seems like Chen is like kind of the less insane one, but then he's like actually no, I'm pretty insane too. And I'm gonna try and match your crazy. So they have an interesting relationship. So watching that develop is quite fun. But I think like what kind of stymies the movie is that you kind of go through these you go through all these I'm just going to say meetings again, like you go through them all and you're like, they don't, some of them just don't add up, and some of them, bringing characters that are then almost immediately forgotten. And like there's got to be an easier way, instead of going from like A to B, this goes from like A to S, to back to C, to to R, to X, and then back to B. Like that's kind of the way the movie works, and you're kind of like, well, that seems overly convoluted, and I guess like a lot of these movies that we've covered do act in the same way, that they're overly convoluted. They've got all these plot points. There's just tons of exposition dumps. We've seen it before in Out for a Kill, in The Foreigner, in Mercenary for Justice. They're all just like really confusingly written, and just have all these kind of unnecessary detours. And just to pause the podcast for a second, I know there's somebody shouting at their whatever their podcast listening device, saying, "Well, that's exactly what you guys do. That's exactly what you guys do." Like so like just in case anybody's now shouting hypocrisy at me, like I get it. You're right. You're right. But like I think in my own defense, I do believe that if a podcast jumps back and forth, like it's not when you open a podcast, you don't expect necessarily a singular narrative. And therefore, it is less confusing where there is the odd detours, and then people come back. That's the defense I'm sticking with. If people want to crucify me for that, well, fair enough. Who am I to criticize? But anyway, it is. I think it's more difficult in a cinematic context to do your storytelling like
No,
that.
I totally agree because I think that's right. That's the whole point of the podcast. A movie, right? It should have at least if it doesn't have like a linear kind of structure, then yes, you maybe want something goofy like some Jim Jarmusch kind of thing or some Jean-Luc Godard kind of thing.
Yes.
I mean, this it's like first off, we have the Matthew Davis character we've talked about a little bit. Did we need the Matthew Davis character at all? He never helps Seagal, right? The only thing he does is he goes and gets information doing surveillance that almost gets him killed because he has to break into the fish market that Kuroda owns, and Kuroda's two goons almost catch him. And
And those actions do directly lead to his death. Not in that moment, but that is what leads to his death.
right, so it leads to his death, but it's all information that Seagal was getting from everybody else anyway, right? Oh, who's Kuroda? Oh, well, Kojima told him who Kuroda was. I think the Tong guy also told him who Kuroda. Everybody was telling him who Kuroda is, right? His girlfriend, Naiko, right? She's telling him who Kuroda is. So, so we've got all these people telling him who Kuroda is. And so did Matthew Davis need to go do like long lens surveillance and then break into this place to try to look through trash and all that stuff, and then eventually, like you said, he gets killed. And I mean, do we need to see him get killed by Chen? Chen essentially is the one who does him in, but they're all, the Yakuza guys are there too. Did we need to see him killed to show just how bad these bad guys are? And so like
Yeah, and also like again, it seems like Kuroda's not necessarily the best villain.
right.
Because he has a penchant for killing his own men, and he's a drug dealer, he's a
Right.
drug smuggler, and therefore you think he'd be pretty protective of his product. But no, in this scene,
Right.
he just insanely rips open what looks like it must be like a kilogram of cocaine,
Right.
and rips it open and just pours it over
Yeah.
Agent Mac, and you're like, well, that's as a drug dealer, that doesn't seem like a sensible
No.
move.
That's probably like millions of dollars worth of that they're trying to move into the United States, and yeah, he just dumps it all over him. Yeah, I mean, and there's that other scene like where that guy, the bald guy who gets beaten up by Seagal, there's that classic Yakuza scene. We always get this Yakuza scene of people cutting off their fingers, right? You've got to
Yes, every Yakuza movie has this. Yes,
yeah. And so it's almost like they're like, we got to take this box off. So the kid goes in and he goes to chop off his finger, and everybody's kind of looking around like, yeah, that's right, kid, you're doing the right thing, And then Kuroda is like, oh, thank you for that, and then blows his head off. Right, just paints the wall with his brains, and everybody's like, "Whoa, I can't believe you did that!" All this stuff, and he's like, "Why? It seems like I've got like this endless supply of henchmen. I could just kill them whenever I want to."
Yeah, no, I mean, he does just seem kind of mean. He does this funny thing where obviously he in the traditional way like you see in all these Yakuza movies, he cuts a finger off and then kind of wraps it in a piece of cloth,
Right.
and Kuroda just picks it up, looks at it, throws it in the bin, and shoots him,
Right.
and you're like.
Yeah.
And the way everybody looks at him is hilarious. The way everybody looks at him is kind of like, have you never seen one of these movies before? Like, we're all supposed to just kind of nod and be like, yes, you've learned your lesson. You've entered the Yakuza way, and then, no, he's just going to shoot the motherfucker.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the same thing happens in Soda no Little Tokyo. The guy presents the finger, and
That's true.
and Kerry Tagawa's like, "No, that's not enough." He's like, "What? What do you mean it's not enough?" And Tagawa takes the knife and stabs him. And so I guess that's the tradition of really bad Yakuza guys. They kill instead of they make you go through the process of cutting off the finger only to kill you after anyway. So yeah, so they're really diabolical in that sense. But
Yeah.
yeah,
But by the way, having watched Showdown in Little Tokyo only just a couple of years ago, that scene with Karen Tagawa with the prostitute woman who he ends up decapitating is
yes.
one of the craziest things I've ever seen in an action
Yes.
movie. I was like, I did not see the scene going that way.
No, that is one of the scenes that makes. So when we have our friends, we have friends who've never really seen bad movies before. I say bad movies, these direct-to-video kind of schlock things that we like.
Shocky movies.
Yeah,
kind of B
we
pictures.
introduce them to Bridge of Dragons first and not Showdown in Little Tokyo because of scenes like that, where we're just like, let's gauge how the people that are watching this, how they feel about certain things. Because, like Bridge of Dragons doesn't really have out and out sexual assault. It just has creepy guys with bad teeth, with rotting teeth that are like,
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
so you don't have that. You don't have a lot of things like, there's not a lot of that kind of stuff. People aren't chopping off limbs and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, depending on how they are with Bridge of Dragons, maybe we move on to Showdown. But Showdown, because of some stuff like that, we're just like, yeah, in mixed audiences, maybe this isn't the movie we want to show everybody. So, yeah. But I remember we did show it for one of our Dolph Fests one time, and there's that scene where Dolph he's got like a gun pointed at Terry Tagawa, and he's like remembering his childhood when Tagawa killed his parents, and it's like his hand shaking. And one of the people watching the movie with us was like, "Does somebody need to get Dolph a candy bar? What's going on there with that?" And it was like, I don't know. I always remember that line. It's like one of my for somebody like making fun of a movie, that was like one of the best ever. So
that's really amazing.
Yeah,
that's really amazing. Now that just makes me want to like. I mean, I know they're kind of like long in the tooth now, but like if you just got all of them. If you just got like if you had like an Expendables version of like just like if you got the Expendables to go up against an expendable version of villains that just had like it had like John Malkovich, it had Cary Tagawa, it had Michael Wincott, like it just had all these like and just watching. Imagine having Cary Tagawa and Michael Wincott trying to up each other's insanity, just out crazy each other. Like that'd be fucking amazing.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No, I agree with you there. And I mean, like the Malkovich thing, just because he's pretty much just doing jobs right now to like remodel his house. So I mean, he would come in and do this and just be that creepy character that he was in Con Air. Yeah.
He's great in that. I love an overacting villain, and he's great in that as Cyrus the Virus. Yeah. Just wrangling them all together. I mean, I know like some of them, like Gary Busey's very problematic. So like, I don't know if we'd have Busey in there, but like
right.
maybe,
yeah,
and then if we could convince Gary Oldman to be like 90s Gary Oldman, just being like, can you do like one last 90s performance,
right.
like you did in True Romance and The Fifth Element and Leon, and like all the Air Force One, can you do one last 90s Oldman?
right. Yeah, right. Because he did a movie with Olga Kurylenko called The Courier, where he was not 90s Oldman. It's not. Yeah, not even the ballpark. Yeah, it is a shame, like you say, because like you get these great. I mean, could you bring in like Michael Caine to just do a little bit of senior?
I mean, I guess like Michael Caine is like 90. Like he's in his 90s now,
right.
But yeah, I mean, like he would be great. But like last year when we covered Leon, I do think that like Gary Oldman, when he goes, it's one of my favorite line readings ever, where he goes, "Get me everyone," and the guy goes, "What, everyone?" And he just goes, "Everyone!"
Yeah, so
he just like his whole body is shaking. It's just like that's the most powerful line reading ever. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, he made that movie. It's so crazy because I think out of all the careers that were built off that, it's almost like Natalie Portman, right? Like she kind of grows into this real Hollywood leading lady kind of thing. And I mean, Oldman's had a good career, post Leon.
Oh no, he has a great career. It's just like he just became this more kind of like prestige actor, and he does like this kind of more kind of subdued things or more serious kind of quote unquote serious things, like that they're a bit more solemn. So he just kind of changed as an actor. But like 90s Oldman is a different, because like He's a different beast. He's a different beast because he's like Oldman is not is not an actor who's like put in that same category as like a Nicolas Cage, but 90s Oldman very much fucking is like he's in the exact same category, you know, like but that seems to be forgotten about, I think, a lot nowadays. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because you think about like the Batman movies where he's Commissioner Gordon, and it is one of those things where if those Batman movies from the '90s were really serious, that's you would have Oldman playing the Joker, or Oldman playing the Riddler, or somebody like that. I mean, he would have been a great if they had used a Riddler in that Batman trilogy. But see, you were stuck with Commissioner Gordon, with him as Commissioner Gordon, but he would have been an amazing Riddler, I think, in those Christopher Nolan Batmans.
Oh yeah. Like I said, but like I don't know. Like maybe he just doesn't have that kind of. Maybe 90s Oldman is no longer there in him. I don't know, but like I think I like to think he's just dormant.
Yes.
And like because like I think like the Commissioner Gordon character kind of fits with like his on-screen persona now that he developed in the 2000s and 2010s. But like you say, 90s Oldman would have been a great Riddler or something like that. So yes. If we do our like villains expendables, I'd love to try and convince Gary Oldman to bring out 90s Oldman for like the last dance of 90s Oldman.
Right. I mean, when you think about it from Stallone's standpoint with making those expendables, that's really what 3 or 4 should have been, is a villains expendables, right? It should have been bring out all of these best baddies here, and instead of these movies that he ended up making that just don't seem to make a lot of sense, like for 3 and 4, one of those should have been the baddies expendables, and he should have called in all of these names, and Vernon Wells probably, right? You bring in somebody like that too.
Vernon Wells, that'd be perfect. Because I mean, obviously, that's again one of the great overacting villains in film history. Like when he plays. I mean, he's also great in The Road Warrior. Also, like one of the weirdest physical transformations I've seen. Like The Road Warrior was made in like 1982. Commando was made in 1985, right. And somehow Vernon Wells transformed from his character in The Road Warrior to his character in Commando, and I'm like, it's like his whole body type has changed, and it's not like he's just gained weight. It's just like he looks like a different person.
Yeah,
yeah,
it is absolutely insane. You really have to watch that first, like the Mad Max movie, to really, like I think it did take a watching for me to realize they were the same person. Yeah, good old Wells. But I think 2 other villain expendables. I think Steven Berkoff and Jurgen Prochnow, I think, would be.
Yes. No. Berkoff's a good call. I like he is one of those kind of classic. He's one of those classic British villains.
Yeah.
That like I like and obviously some of the classic British villains that have passed away, like Joss Ackland in Lethal Weapon 2, also very good. Also, if we're doing this, if we're going down the British path as well, we've got to include Jeremy Irons. Like Jeremy Irons he knows how to overact. Like he is. Right. If you unleash Jeremy Irons, it's something.
When did John Cross, when I don't know if it was on his podcast or he was on mine, he was saying that in The Beekeeper, Jeremy Irons was essentially playing Majors, that the old the prime minister who came in after was it Jonathan Majors? No, Jonathan Majors is the actor.
Yes,
but the prime minister, he essentially, that's the character that he's playing now. So we need good 90s Irons back as well, I think.
Yes, no, he like reconnect with like kind of the kind of 90s Irons, or even early 2000s Irons, because the Dungeons and Dragons movie is not worth watching apart from Jeremy Irons' performance. And I even love the way he says his name, he's like Jeremy Irons, everything is done with a dramatic flourish when it comes to Irons.
Though, I mean, I guess it would be kind of an interesting inside joke if he was playing former Prime Minister John Majors, Jeremy Irons was playing that, but playing it with his like this aplomb or whatever, and it's like, that would be an interesting idea for I'm going kind of crazy now, but the idea that John Majors emerges from not political where nobody knows, but after being prime minister, his whole thing was to take over the United Kingdom again and make it his own dictatorship, and that he gathers.
This could be the
villains.
plot of like the villains Expendables. Yeah. He's leading like a takeover of the UK for something. Yeah.
Exactly. And I don't even know why. All I know about John Majors as an American is just that I think he took over after Thatcher, right? He was.
He did.
Yeah.
He was like most of his cabinet were complete sleazeballs, and like he is like somebody I disagree with politically, but he's hard to kind of like really hate because he's such like he is the prime version of what you think of when you think of like a kind of boring gray politician. Like that's right. he is that. So it's hard to like truly hate him because it's like, well, I dislike your world view, but at the same time there's so little to hang on to that like it's hard to like work up any sort of passion because you're obviously just a black hole of passion. So like yeah.
Yeah, because from an American standpoint, it's like you had Margaret Thatcher, who was just like always on the news here in America, the Iron Lady, and and then you had Tony Blair, and so it's like in between Blair and Thatcher, it's like, oh, there, just John Major, and I think also too, I guess because Clinton. I don't think, I think he would just go, he didn't like have like, it wasn't like kind of the same thing as like with Tony Blair and Bush, where they were like, planning the Iraq war and all this kind of stuff, that it was like, he was always in the news here as well. But yeah, it is kind of from an American standpoint too, I guess, like, from as much as, British politics are in the news here in America. John Majors didn't really make any news that made it here.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, he was a one-term PM, and like it was a very boring time in the UK. Like it's like a time where the vibes were not great. There was he would presided over Black Wednesday, which was like a crash in the UK that caused major economic disrupt. So it was kind of depressed time in the early 90s, and things would not be revived until the kind of the whole mid 90s Britpop cool Britannia kind of thing that happened. And like I guess like it's a very antiquated time because like before everybody decided, before we kind of realized that Tony Blair is not a great guy, like in the 90s, like it was very much, I guess, kind of very much seen that the Liberals had won, and now we had like cool kid leaders, we had like, Tony Blair, who was like hanging out with Oasis, and had Bill Clinton in his sax. That's and right, like we were like, oh man, our leaders are cool now, and they're fun and charismatic, and they're totally not doing damage. And then it turns out, they weren't as great as all that. And and then obviously things went to shit post 2001. But we don't need to get into that. No. I think we've got a Steven Seagal movie to talk about.
I was going to say, just quickly, it's the same thing with Clinton. We thought Clinton was the coolest. You look back on it now, and it's like, Clinton is the reason for the economic collapse. The reason why music sucks, especially here in America, is Clinton's fault, because he signed the Communications Act, which allowed Clear Channel to consolidate all the radio stations. He's he was Defense of Marriage Act. Yeah,
no, I mean like that, and that's all terrible. And I think, I mean, in terms of the economic collapse, I mean, like a lot of that, I mean, basically all roads lead back to like Reagan and Thatcher and the deregulation that they did. So like, yes, they have wrought a lot of ruin. But not just in their terms, but in the last 40 years, over 40 years, in the last 45 years, I guess. So yes. So yes, a lot of the blame can be put at their door. A lot of their obviously their successors, even their kind of vaguely liberal successors, like the Clintons and Blairs of the world. But yeah, a lot of roads lead back to them. did not do good things. Yes, not a fan
No.
of either, as you might be gathering,
Yes.
from this apparently now political podcast
Right,
that we've
exactly.
started.
You know, what I think is kind of fascinating, I think, too, from American and UK perspective, is that like whenever I'm seeing like subreddits and things like that where people are talking about like kind of, you know, people our age are doing kind of nostalgia things, they're talking about different times and stuff like that. It is kind of fascinating because of the similar progression of, you know, you had Thatcher, we had Reagan, then, you know, we had, you know, the first Bush, you had Major, and then it's like, you know, Clinton and Tony Blair. That sort of that same kind of those vibes were kind of similar in a way politically, and so
Yeah,
we
yeah,
grew up
yeah.
in
They
these
were
similar
very much so.
political climates. And then you hear from people who lived in other parts of the world, you know, places like Germany or Canada, you know, wherever, who, you know, Australia, you know, where they didn't have that same thing, you know, like they had
Yeah.
very different political worlds. And so it's always kind of a fascinating thing because a lot of times, like, you know, it's mostly, you know, I'm usually talking with people from America or from the UK, and so we have that similar almost upbringing in a way. There's that there's a similarity there that a lot of the rest of the world. I don't know. I mean, I don't know for sure, but it feels like when I talk to people from the rest of the world, it's almost like,
No, no, I understand what you're saying.
yeah,
I would say like a key difference though would be that like particularly with the Thatcher Reagan thing, that like Reagan, it seems like, was broadly not a divisive figure, really, in America. Maybe amongst kind of minority communities, he might be, and particularly amongst the LGBTQ communities, very divisive figure. But like broadly in the mainstream, seems like not divisive. Whereas like Thatcher was throughout her term was always divisive, and
yeah,
like it was always very split up, and it was always very much like for example, I'm from Scotland, and Scotland was very anti-Thatcher her whole time she was there, even at her most popular, and so she was always polarizing. So we talk a lot about polarization, and like it seemed like certainly at that time that America hewed to the political center, and there was, and so they're more kind of like, what is this polarization? Whereas in the UK, we've kind of like, since the days of Thatcher before, there's always kind of been polarization. It might be more deeply divided because of social media and stuff like that, but it's kind of always been there. So it doesn't seem quite as freaky to us as it appears to be freaky to you guys.
yes, because one of the things about Reagan is that Reagan definitely he still worked with the other party on things. And so Democrats who, especially these central, because a lot of the Democrats that were around at that time, like for example, like someone like a Tip O'Neill, who's a Massachusetts politician, you know, he would
Mm-hmm.
work with Reagan, and Reagan would use, you know, they would come together so that they could get bills passed and things like that. And Tip O'Neill knew how to like bring a lot of value back to like the state of Massachusetts where he was from, or to other, you know, to other parts of the world or other parts of the country. So it's like people felt like they were getting things. So like there's the people like my family, we were like, okay, we're poor, we're not going to make any money under Reagan. And really the only reason why we had money under Clinton was more because my parents were younger and they had
Mm-hmm.
established themselves in their careers more as the 90s went
Mm-hmm.
on. But it felt like, oh, it
Mm-hmm.
was because of Clinton, you know, that we were, you know, the economy seemed like it was better, but really it was just because my parents were
Mm-hmm.
older and making more money. But yeah, there's definitely a sense with Reagan that politicians, when you go back to those times, you know, you see people like a Biden or somebody like that, you know, they would be voting for his. They would be voting in favor of his Supreme Court nominations, you know, or they would
Mm-hmm.
vote for his, you know, and whereas nowadays it's like, yeah, the Democrats do not vote for any bills that Republicans put out. Republicans don't vote for any bills that Democrats. And it's like there's no sense of like, oh, what if we come together and make this work? It's more like, no, we need to make sure we have enough seats in the House and the Senate to just pass our bills without needing to get any support. And yeah, that is a big difference where Reagan was able to get more of a coalition of Democrats on his side.
And I guess like, and I'll make this the last political point I make. There is no direct par for par comparison to the left and the right in UK and the left and the right in the US, because there's a lot of, growing up as like a kind of political person, even from kind of my mid-teens in the 90s, like watching American politics, there's a lot of people in the Democrat Party that, like, if they were ported over to the UK, they wouldn't be members of the Labour Party. They
Right.
would be members of the Conservative Party. Like, You know what I mean? Like you're like
Yeah.
1 degree further to the right than we are in terms of like politicians.
I would say it's even more than 1 degree. I mean, you take like
Well, yeah, maybe even a couple of degrees, but like all I'm saying is there's definitely people who are part of the Democrat Party that would be closer to the British Conservatives than they would be to Labour. And Labour has its own right wing, you know, so
yeah,
it has its own coalition of like there's a spectrum there of like, you know, kind of so, you know, like Labour people who are essentially soft conservatives and Labour people who are like kind of hard left. And I would say that like there's always been Labour people who are hard left, whereas like the development of like the kind of the AOCs and the kind of the squad and stuff like that, which is more closer to the hard left of the British Labour Party, seems to have only appeared very recently in the US. So like there's been that you've had less of a left,
yeah.
you know, in certainly in the mainstream than we have traditionally had in the UK.
Well, yeah, because I mean, like AOC in particular, so she's like interesting because, like you said, she's kind of paired up with the squad, like they kind of caucus, but like she's a
Yeah.
little bit more shrewd politically. But it's also interesting, like people label her as radical, but her radical ideas are things like, you know, more rights for workers, better pay for workers, you know, single payer health care, you know.
Yes, I think that is the difference that like you know if you like put her over if you put the AOC over to like a European country or even the UK, she would be seen as left wing for sure, but more of a kind of social democrat
Right,
progressive, but not like hard left. She wouldn't
right.
be necessarily tarred as socialist, which she obviously is in the US.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things when people talk about AOC being radical, it's like if you ask them, like, well, what's radical about her platform? You know, and they would
Yeah.
say nobody really knows, right? Because it's really there isn't really anything that should be considered radical. Like it's like yeah, discourse in the U.S. has moved so far to the right that reality is considered to have a liberal bias. That's kind of where
I think so, and because it is interesting that everything's just like a degree or two kind of to the right. Because even people who are very left wing, like you know, people tried to make like direct comparisons between Bernie Sanders
yeah,
and Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn's way more left wing than Bernie Sanders. So like, but people put them in the people, particularly U.S. media, put them in the same bracket,
yeah.
which I think is a wrong categorization of, you know, but
Yeah. It's a
like
fascinating thing. Yeah, it is. It's absolutely, you know, but it is this like idea, like what's considered radical. Like, yeah, like the rest of Europe, like Canada, you know, they would not see AOC as radical. They would say, oh, that's, like you said, like that's a left wing politician. It is kind of crazy that, you know, that we you know that she's given that moniker of radical when, yeah, like she's just saying the things that she would need to be elected as a left-wing politician in Europe, right? Like that's just like, you know, sort of how it
yeah,
works.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, just to wrap up that conversation, I just wanted to say that today's episode of the Political Podcast is brought to you by Squarespace.
Right, right. Yes. Jitsi. Our podcast is brought to you by
Oh
Jitsi.
yeah, boy, Jitsi, just get our podcast sponsor.
Yes, the free crowdsourced version of Zoom. Use Jitsi today. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a very good ad read, Matt. Yeah,
Thank you.
we should definitely Jitsi should definitely check
Yes.
us out. You
Right.
know,
I could, you know, go, I guess because they're free and crowdsourced. I don't know if they have any advertising, but yeah, we could, you know, yeah, I mean, you know, the ad read thing, it is a kind of a funny thing because I listen to podcasts that have, you know, that have ads, and I haven't gotten to that level yet. With
no.
though the one area of the world that this podcast does really well in is actually where you're currently residing out in New Zealand, and
Oh,
so if there's
okay.
any New Zealand products out there that you'd like to advertise on this podcast here, yeah, just letting you know, we have a really, yeah, we rank really well for movies and film in New Zealand. So if you're a New Zealand
Oh,
filmmaker, you know, trying to be the next Peter Jackson, yeah, let us know. I'll get the word out on your movie. So yeah,
oh, yeah.
yeah,
Well, that's cool. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, we'll try and get some New Zealand products involved.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. Well, I guess
Yeah.
the
So,
last thing in this movie that I wanted to chat about was the Naoko
mhm.
storyline, the girlfriend.
Yes.
So we first meet her. She runs this fusion club, and it turns out like she's one of Seagal's assets. They talk. She's just giving him the come hither stare the whole time. She's checking him out. She gives him a big smile when he leaves, and then we find out that they have a thing together. They go sit in the park, and he's confessing his love to her, and she's like, "I've been wanting you to tell me this all these years. I'm only helping you because I love you. And yeah, let's get married." And then they go and have their awkward love scene, right? And but it kind of comes out of nowhere, right? Because again, he's going around to all these other people, and it feels like Naoko would have been the one you go to first to get all the information from.
Yeah, because she seems to be like, in the movie, she owns this. She is the manager, or she owns
She owns it.
this, and she owns this nightclub called Fusion. And within the story of the movie, Fusion seems to be the kind of the center of the universe, because like all the gangsters converge here, the older gangsters, the younger gangsters, and also like like the martial art masters and all that kind of thing. They're all here. They all come to this club that's kind of like a weird, a little bit of like it's an interesting club, like because like there is a scene that feels like it's kind of like a strip club,
Right.
but then because like this MC guy who's like a stand-up comedian or whatever, is like he brings on these kind of women in kind of tight clothes or whatever, and then it's like, but then it's kind of not. It's just
Right.
part of his variety act. I don't know. Like it's very strange. And then they've got like topless women who are like swimming underneath the water in these kind of tanks around the club for some reason.
Right.
I don't know. I don't understand these things. But yeah, but it she very much seems like she is plugged into everything. So it feels like we almost don't need to meet any other characters. And like you say, we don't need to have the H and Mac character or anybody, because she seems to know all the players. And seems to be aware of all the players. And it's like made obvious to us that she's kind of aware of all the players, which makes it more confusing. But about the other meetings. But like yeah, in terms of the love story, it you're right. It comes out of nowhere. Yes, when they first meet, it seems like they've known each other for a while, and she's been a contact or whatever. And then, like you say, she gives Seagal like a loving stare, but like every woman he meets, like
Right.
gives him a
Yes.
loving stare. So like it doesn't seem like unusual. So like the scene, the like proposal scene where it just cuts to them like walking through the cherry blossoms, um, really comes out of nowhere, because like um we've been given a sign that there might be some flirtation there, but we've been given no indication that there's any kind of real affection, real love there. And like I guess like because like the way that Seagal is quite wooden, or very wooden,
Right.
it means he doesn't give a lot away, kind of emotionally on screen, so you don't get really any indication of like there being like a deeper connection there. And so like when they're just like espousing this deeper connection that was supposedly there the whole time, and she supposedly has been forever in love with him and will go to the ends of the earth with him wherever he goes, and he loves her and wants to give everything up for her, and this is like one last job, um like it's a very, very strange scene. That you're like, what? There's just no establishing that these two are like a couple, or they have any kind of like romantic thing, beyond like this kind of like, oh, maybe he has flirty banter with this contact. Okay. Um and then yeah, and then we cut to like the classic kind of like really awkward, really weird Seagal sex scene, where yeah, we do the awkward sexy hug, and then it kind of cuts to like the next day. I kind of cut like, yeah, and then it cuts to them in bed, and it cuts to the next day. Like it's yeah, it's very it's very strangely done. Obviously, yeah, I don't know. Like Seagal, obviously, he's one of the producers of the movie. He presumably arranges it in this certain way. But it comes off as weird and awkward, and yeah, it just I never like these moments in Seagal movies. And to be fair, like there's a lot of the action stars, like when they are put in like kind of sex scenes, kind of romantic scenes, it often falls flat, but it falls extra flat in a Seagal film.
Yeah, he seems to be the worst. Because we've talked about this before. That like other than
Mm.
maybe like like Van Damme, and then obviously like a Pierce Brosnan or somebody like that. It just seems like these actors aren't good at these scenes. But
Yeah,
Seagal is the worst at it. Like it's just
he is the absolute worst. There is a yeah. I guess there's a few action stars that are good, and then there's some people who are kind of naturally um have like a natural sexual presence, like somebody like Antonio Banderas.
yeah.
Like Antonio Banderas has like a natural sexual energy, charisma, whatever you want to call it, that kind of beams off of him, and you're like, oh yeah, yeah. Like you look at Antonio Banderas and you're like, yes, Antonio Banderas fucks, yes,
Right, right.
absolutely.
Right,
Like,
exactly.
but yeah, there's just like not a lot of these action stars. It just comes off as it's awkward, and it feels like they've never they just don't know what to do with themselves, and like they know what they're doing when they're fighting, but like it's just like in that sort of arena the choreography of that is baffling to them, or they just have like an issue with it, or whatever. I'm not sure what the problem is there necessarily, but yeah, it often comes off weird, and like it's the same with Seagal's the worst defender, but it is the same with the likes of Stallone. It's the same with Lundgren. All these guys come off real awkward and weird in sex scenes.
Yeah, I wonder with Lundgren if part of it too is his size, and it's like
Maybe.
they don't know how to shoot these scenes, and it's like it's very common, right? He's usually like a good foot taller than the leading lady that he's acting with, and I wonder if that. But like you said, you don't know too. It's like yeah, they're just I mean, you feel like Grace Slick if she was dating him, she must have thought he was pretty good as a lover. But then if especially if she was getting him parts and things like Rocky and View to a Kill. But by the same token, it's like you're right. Like you watch him, and you're just like weird. Like this guy's like this natural athlete, and he seems to be like this debonair kind of European jet setter kind of person who he's in a love scene with somebody, and it's like he's just gangly and all over the place. It doesn't seem to make any sense.
Yeah. No, no, yeah, they just I think they just generally come off as kind of awkward. They're like,
Yeah.
they just come off over as this kind of like block of ice of just being
Right.
like, like just as if they want just the woman to do everything for them. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just like
Right.
they're like I or sometimes it comes across that they're just too cool for the love scene, and they're just
Yeah.
like, ah yeah, you do everything. Like I don't know. Like, yeah, it's very strange. It's very strange. But yes, less of this. Less.
Exactly. So then we get the scene where Seagal, he's back at the Fusion Club, and that's where we kind of get these two
Mhm.
plot points where he gives Naoko this like comb that a woman had from like the Edo period or the Edo period. So it's
Mhm.
like it's sort of this ancient thing or whatever. So it's like the gift that he gives her. And then Matthew Davis shows up and he's like, "Why don't you go do the surveillance yourself and just do like a long camera? Because I don't want you." And then he makes the joke about the AD. Don't do another. Don't be doing any more ADs or whatever. So that's where he's going on his mission that gets him killed. And then Naoko, there's a sense of like, okay, this might be the point where because we see the Yakuza guys are there. Because remember,
Yep.
Kuroda had his freak out at his place and pointed his gun at Cowboy Yakuza, and they both are like, when Kuroda's like, you guys need to get out of here because I'm kind of losing it a bit. They were like, yeah, we'll get out of here. We'll listen to you and we'll go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We
Yeah,
don't want to be killed. So yes,
yeah,
both Kuroda and Shades are there
yeah.
at a table, kind of eyeing them up. Yeah.
Yeah. So then later in the movie, Seagal is going with Jewel. So again, if these characters are making it convoluted for you, believe me, it was convoluted for us too. I think he's going with like Jewel to go to like this Japanese like casino type place that's in like a kind of a seedier part of Tokyo where it's like this brightly lit thing
Oh,
with anime and stuff.
yeah. They
Yeah,
got it's cause like Chen
right.
the
The Tong guy, right?
the Tong guy,
Yeah,
he runs it's called pachinko. They're
right.
pachinko machines.
That's right.
Um so like yeah, and it's like a kind of it's a type of type of gambling kind of they're like slot machines, I guess.
Yeah,
But only found in Japan. They're the particular type of slot machine that's generally found in Japan. But yeah, that's what he runs. So that's why they go there to the and I guess like because the pachinko machines are like these kind of like arcade kind of slot machines or whatever, and of course they have like glass frontage, so they are perfect for a Seagal film
exactly.
for Seagal to just like to just throw people into, and there's one guy who just smashes his face into it several times, and like so they're perfectly made for a Seagal film.
Exactly. Well, and this kind of gets back to what you're saying too about this film being well shot, right? Is that it's perfect for a Seagal film because you can smash people into it, but it's also like this very brightly lit thing against the backdrop of the night of Tokyo. So it's like they're
Mm,
going to this like unique space that's just like very Tokyo-ish, and it's like and like the way that they shoot Seagal walking into it is really cool. And then when he fights Chen, right, does he fight him there, or does he go find him somewhere else? Is this like a fact finding thing where he's trying to find out where Chen is? I trying to remember how that worked,
um,
because people can be in back rooms in these places all the time, right? But I think it's
yeah.
whenever it is he goes and finds Chen, they have their fight scene. But while he's investigating this stuff, Naoko is going to her car after because she's at Fusion and the Yakuza guys show up. Kuroda's like really being like really creepy with her and kind of scary with her.
Mhm.
And when she
Yeah.
goes up to her car, Cowboy Yakuza kills her. Uh, and so this is supposed to give Seagal added motivation to kill all of the baddies. But again, I don't know about you, but I felt like he didn't need added motivation. He was sent to go do a job. I don't know that he would have just not done the job if his girlfriend hadn't been killed.
Yeah, I'm not sure he needed that in motivation either necessarily. And also like I mean, yeah, his partner's already been killed. I don't know. So he's going on all sorts of vengeance. And then when he because it is directly after he like puts people through the pachinko machines that he goes upstairs to get Chen.
That's right.
Um so like and then when he gets into Chen's office, he notices the book that Master Chung had. So we presume Master Chung has been murdered by Chen because the last time we see Master Chung is he goes to visit Chen to say like back off, don't work
Right.
with Kuroda, we want peace or whatever.
Yeah.
So like we presume Master Chung is dead. He's like on like three missions of vengeance.
Right.
Um,
Right. Exactly. And I mean, I guess, yeah, because the Eddie George thing happened so far in the past that right that one doesn't count. But
yes, no,
right,
that's not connected to our current gangster issue. That
right,
like that, so he's not getting vengeance for Eddie George.
right,
Like yeah, maybe if he had also murdered like the Burmese gangster, like
right,
maybe that be vengeance for Eddie George. But like
right.
so yeah, so we're there's all sorts of revenge going on.
Yeah.
Even though like when the partner first dies, it seems like he kind of doesn't care that much about it. But then at the end of the film, it seems like he really cared about it, because
They don't
we
know
got
what
to
happened
show.
to him, right?
Yeah,
Like they don't
I
find out what
know.
happened to him until they fight
No.
Kuroda.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
so Kuroda tell. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah. So we get this great fight with Chen. So Mai Lee goes in with him. Mai Ling has gone in with him to confront Chen, and so she's there. So any of Chen's henchmen, she can take care of them. Like she throws a knife and gets it in one guy's throat. So there's all that kind of stuff that happens there. I'm trying to remember when does the okay. No, I'm going to save this for later because it happens in the next scene. But
Mhm.
so then he gets his fight with Chen, and like we were talking about, Chen is obviously Ken Lo's fantastic martial artist, and the scenes that Seagal, I mean, it seems like he does more of the scenes with a stunt double, and it's like it's a stunt double gets thrown through the table, the stunt double gets kicked in
Yes,
the
he
head,
definitely thought through. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, but it is for a Seagal fight scene. This is one of the better ones, I think. Even with his
Mhm.
his his, his, his big budget movies. Ken Lo is good, and it seems like Seagal is into doing this fight scene with him. But eventually, right, he kind of beats the crap out of him. He gets the better of him, and then he throws him out the window.
Yeah. Um, yeah. No, no, absolutely. I would agree. Um, and like, this is 2005. So as much as like Seagal is less mobile, he's still got his hand speed. And
Yes.
like he's doing what you call his slap through. And in terms of that, there is actually like a really great sequence within this fight, where he's doing that kind of slapping, and Ken Lo is, as Chen is like blocking it, and you get
Yes.
this really great exchange of like quick fire slaps, and like he's still, like I say, at this stage he still has like the hand speed that looks really good on camera, and like Ken Lo is like matching him beat for beat, and it's a really fun sequence. So if you like the kind of the martial arts that like Seagal tends to do in these films, like that's a really good showcase of it. It's a really fun moment if you are previously enjoyed that kind of particular brand of martial arts.
Yeah. Now, and full disclosure, when that scene was happening, when I was watching the movie, it was around the time. It was like close to when our cat's feeding time is, and so I was watching it on my
Hmm.
laptop, and
Hmm.
um, and so I was in bed watching my laptop, and he was like marking the computer because that's what he does as a way to tell me it's time. He wants to eat.
Time to feed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
first he marks things around me, then he starts like biting, putting his paws on me, stuff like that. He'll meow a lot, all that kind of stuff. He pushes it like he wants you. Sometimes like an hour before his feeding time, he'll start demanding food, and it's like, no, you've got your feeding time. But so I was kind of like trying to explain the fight scene to him as a way to get him to like leave the computer alone as he's marking it. I was like, oh no, this the slap chop thing is going on here, and he's just like
Yeah.
meowing and marking. But it was kind of jarring as I'm trying to watch the scene. So I probably
Yeah.
didn't take it in as well as I should have. Like because you
Yeah.
said the slap chop, like the slapping foo between the two of them is really good. It's like again, it's one of those things where later on. Part of it is they don't get good martial arts. Like, I mean, obviously they're not going to get somebody like a Ken Lo for a lot. I mean, Byron Mann is probably one of the closest that they get, for that. But even
Mm,
when they get
mm.
people like Bren Foster, who could at least do a decent scene, they don't really do scenes like this. Seagal doesn't do scenes like this to really that much as things go on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And like, well, I guess as we discussed, Ken Lo was part of the Jackie Chan stunt team, and like, he's a high level, martial artist, and a very good screen martial artist at the
Yeah.
same time. Yeah, like I really like this sequence. It gets all your classic beats, the slap drop thing, and the defense is the slap drop thing. Like Ken Lo gets thrown, Seagal getting kicked in the head into this coffee table, then like Seagal throwing Ken Lo through this glass cabinet, and then of course the fight ends with Seagal throwing Ken Lo through like this window that's like several stories up, and like that's the end of Ken Lo. But yeah, so like it's definitely one of the high points of the film, and like really to be honest, like I expect nothing less from Ken Lo based on the other stuff I've seen him in like Jackie Chan films.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this is, it's. I think it's as good as you might if you're going to have Ken Lo in a movie like this. This is probably as good
Mm.
as you're going to get from him. I mean, he does a little bit of stuff when he kills because he's the one who kills Matthew Davis. So he does a little bit of stuff there, but for the most part, like this is kind of it. So we
Yeah, his other best moment is where he kills that guy during the ceremony, and he like jumps on him. And he does that classic kind of, like
right.
and then like like jumps on it, and you like, and you hear like the crunch of the neck under
That's
his foot
right.
and
That's
stuff, and
right.
then
Yes.
he gives out like this yowl,
Yeah.
like that. That's pretty cool. Like that, I
Yeah.
think that's another highlight of Ken Lo in the movie. Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good point. That's early on there. Yeah, when the guy doesn't want to join, right? He doesn't want to take the blood oath, and he's like, "Oh, you don't want to take the blood oath? Okay, I'll show you what happens there." So, So now we get into our final fight here, and beforehand, of course, Seagal goes and sees the tattoo guy, and the tattoo guy discloses like, "Hey, Kuroda killed my family too. I'm happy to go with you on this mission of revenge." And he's like, "Yeah, we're going in with swords. This sword is really sharp. It can kill a lot of people." Seagal has Mai Ling says, "Hey, I want to come along too," and he's like, "No, you're staying here. He kind of puts it as like, I don't want your death on my hands if you get killed in this, but really he kind of just parks her. Fortunately, she does come back when the tattoo guy gets into trouble when they get into the temple. But when they get into the temple, it's really like Seagal. I mean, again, like you said, this is some fun stuff here where it's like Seagal. They're pulling out some Japanese samurai stuff here where he's just throwing people through rice paper, cutting off arms, slashing people, all stuff like that.
I do like this sequence, and like I have to say, when the tattoo guy is like fighting, and he gets injured, and you're like, oh man, the tattoo guy might be doomed,
Right.
and like I absolutely love, when it looks like a good guy character is about to die, and then another good guy character turns up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I think that's always a fun spot, and it's particularly fun because Miley literally like cartwheels into the scene,
Mm-hmm.
and like. So like I think like she does this kind of flip and like it's awesome, and then she comes in and kills a couple of people.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really fun beat. I really enjoyed that. And yeah, like also there's like I don't know if I can say it's funny, but it certainly felt over the top when like I know that obviously the cowboy guy killed his betrothed,
Right.
but when he's like, I should smash you to pieces, and then he like just like absolutely hammers the guy in the center of the head with the samurai sword
Yes.
like 5 or 6 times and just absolutely caves in his skull. I was like, that is more mean. Like, even though I've watched this film before, I was like, that I still was like, whoa, that was more mean spirited than I expected from this movie. Like it's super gnarly.
Yes, right. Because it's almost like what would be a fitting death for that guy? Because he's just, he's the one who kills Naoko. He's,
Yeah.
he's, but yeah, and they, I guess they could, that was what they came up with. Yeah, I love that one. Now, was this where the chopstick death happens as well? Is that in here?
Oh yes. Oh
Yes.
no, I did mean. Yeah. No, that was one I did mean to mention as well because
Yeah.
there's a weird moment in that because like as we talked about, Seagal being the ultimate in cultural appropriation, and we've seen him throughout the movie like enjoying Japanese food and being like the king of Japanese culture, and then there's this weird beat that just before he kills the guy with the chopsticks, he's like, "Ooh, sushi, you eat this crap," and
Right.
you're like. I expected that from like a kind of like one of those kind of East meets West, kind of Black Rain type movies
Yeah.
where we've established that like, this guy's like kind of an American dick or whatever.
Yeah.
But like, isn't like, Seagal's character supposed to be the lover of all things Japan, and also we see them eat sushi earlier in the movie. So like, what?
Right.
It just didn't make any sense to me. Um, um, but I did laugh at the direct next line where he's like, "Do you need these chopsticks?" And he, kills the guy with them. Where
Right,
it's like, "Oh,
stabs him in
that's
the
a good
throat.
Arnie style one liner."
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and I mean the stuff, the sushi they had. I mean, it looked like he had salmon roe there, which you'd think like
Yeah,
Seagal would be like a connoisseur of that kind of thing. Like
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But
And like, when he meets up with the sensei, they were like in a sushi restaurant. I don't know. It didn't make any sense to me. I was like,
no, right. You think if anybody would be a connoisseur of sushi as cultural appropriative guy, kind of like that, like because
yeah,
I don't think there's like this kind of thing that like sushi is like an American thing. It's like no, you go to Japan. I mean, they have sushi masters that that are have worked on the craft of making sushi for a long time. Like it's not like it's like it's not like American Chinese food, I guess, or something like that. It's like,
yeah.
oh, chicken finger, you're eating chicken wings, yeah, that's or whatever. It's like no, this is like it's legitimate Japanese food.
Yeah, seems very strange. It seems
Right.
it was a very odd moment, in in a sea of very odd moments. But like, yeah, it stood out to me still. Um, Yeah, and then I guess we should talk about the final fight,
Yes.
where like it's not as even as the Ken Lo fight. Like, and when I say even, I mean even brackets by Seagal standards, which is like
Yes.
basically mainly Seagal destroys the guy, but
Right.
he gets a few kicks in.
Yeah.
We it's a sliding scale. You've got to understand that by Seagal standards, that is what counts as a close fight.
Yes.
This one less close. He just absolutely slays a guy. He does like cut Seagal's like ankle at
Yeah.
some stage, like which minor grazes him and causes him some commotion for a second, and before he just like straights up slices and dices the guy. But still fun because of the way Kuroda acts the scene, and it is like still acting as if he's in control of what's happening, even though he's just bleeding out. He's just
Right. Because yeah, they definitely do like some nods to like, like Senjuro or like old samurai movies where he does like, Seagal does the like run across slash, and
yeah,
then Kuroda gets the cut where the blood is just spraying out of him all over the place. Yeah, so they definitely give you some of those moments there. But yeah, it's interesting because so here's maybe where I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are here, is that like
hmm
this is like a fitting end to this movie, but a fitting end to a Seagal movie is not always a fitting end to a movie. Like, so this is like a movie, like any other movie like this would be a great end scene. But it's almost like with Seagal, it's like, no, we got to do something Seagalish. And so the Seagalish thing is this Jewel woman gets called in by Atherton as like a cleanup team. And they go into this temple that, that the bad guy Kuroda was running after Seagal and Mai Ling and the tattoo guy have left, and they start spraying like this like blue foam over everything. And I guess because it removes DNA or something. I don't know.
yeah.
Um,
But I think like yeah, or they can't get like the guy says something about DNA, or
right,
but then like the Wikipedia plot synopsis is like the blue goo means that they can't get fingerprints off of things. And I was like,
right.
I guess, but like no, it's very yeah, like you say, like the way the film wraps up is like the bad guy has died, and like and the final blow is cool because like we get that kind of classic kind of high pressure blood thing that
Yeah,
happens in like a lot of like Japanese movies. Like if you've seen like a bunch of Miike movies, or if you've
yeah,
seen like a battle royale or whatever, you'll have definitely seen that kind of like anytime somebody is murdered or stabbed, like blood like just shoots out of them
yeah.
like it's being shot out of a water gun or something.
Right.
And like that's what happens in the final blow. That's fun. And then yeah, it makes sense. I guess it makes it. You could have ended the film there, but then it cuts to like Nico's funeral, and I'm kind of like, I guess that kind of makes sense. Like, okay, you didn't want to end the movie on just like killing the bad guy and walking into the sunset. Let's go to Nico's funeral. All right, there's the three of them there, tattoo guy and Miley. And then it's like, well, and I had totally forgotten the end because I was like, oh, it ends with Nico's funeral, surely. And then yeah, you get this extra scene where like the cleanup squad led by Jewel, who turn up in this van and fast and beautiful, like apparently the cleanup squad, and they clean up the crime scene, and like and yeah, so they do that, and then you get the scene where the police then get to the crime scene, and they see that there's blue goo and everything, and they're like, "Oh, god damn it, we can't get any DNA on this." Oh, very clever.
Right.
And then we cut to like Kojima, who's like the Yakuza that we like apparently, and like he is now like because the previous old Godfather, the old Yakuza Godfather, got murdered by Kuroda and the gang, and so Kojima is anointed Godfather of the Yakuza clan, and we all cheer apparently because the murders they do are okay. I don't know. And then and you're like, is this movie going to end? And then we have like one last kind of um like Seagal walking through the cherry blossoms, having kind of like a flashback to to the scene where he does the proposal, and then like the Naiko character just fading away, to notify that she's no longer with us, and it's just all in his mind. And then he has like a very solemn kind of further wandering through the cherry blossoms, and then like and we have like one last shot of the sun because it's into the sun, and you're like, well, that's the end of the movie, and then you're like, actually, hold on a second, we cut to like one last thing where he's in his car, and like this is not a new scene, this is just a repurposed, like this scene happens earlier on in the movie and they're just playing it again, where he is driving through the streets of Tokyo, and William Atherton's character phones in and says like, I got a job for you, and he's like, yeah, and then you're like, and then the movie finally fucking ends, and you're like, what the fuck was all that?
Right, exactly. But the end is, we get the credits rolling, and we get Seagal singing. We get Seagal.
Oh yes, the don't you cry, as we mentioned earlier, which I mean, fantastically cheesy that. I guess that like at least we didn't get Strut, which is like, if people don't know, Strut is like on his album Songs from the Crystal Cave, his debut album. There is a song called Strut where he affects a Jamaican accent, and does a reggae song. And like, I mean, here's the sample of the lyrics. Girl, what you really want all night? Me want that body. Make me feel nice. Boy, tell me what you really want all night. Me want the punani. See, for make me nice. Me want the body. Him want the punani. And me know it nice. So, there you go. The lyrical genius of Steven Seagal for you there. Full flow. But that song's not on the film. Like that's just on the album. Yeah. So there we go. Into the sun.
Into the sun. Into the sun. It's currently on Tubi. It is. So this is another one of these fascinating ones in this early 2000s period where there's a lot of things that you like about it. There's a lot of things that you say, oh, these it's well shot in moments. It's got some good fight scenes. It's got some stuff that works for it. You've got some actors in it that we like. But on the other hand, Seagal is just in there Seagaling it up so much, and it's like, and there's that question, right? Does it add to the entertainment value or detract from it? Because it's like, it's so Seagal.
It is so Seagal.
Yeah.
I don't know. It certainly makes it unique.
Yes.
I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but like Seagal films are unique experiences. This is not the worst experience you could go through. Even though for like there's that middle section that's really, really quite dull, and you get not a lot of action and a lot of kind of inane talking, and a lot of talking that doesn't need to be there. I don't know, but like it's definitely not the worst. Like, so and there's definitely moments to kind of recommend it, not necessarily as a good movie, but like as an entertaining movie to watch. But yeah, I think like if you're not familiar with the Seagal experience, you'll probably find that midsection of the movie like a real slog, and that might turn you off. But then you don't get to the fun stuff at the end with the the Chen fight and the Kuroda fight, and some of the goofiness that happens at the end.
Yeah, I mean, I think for people that either, you're just getting into this kind of stuff, so you're listening to us talk about these, and you're like, what is this whole Seagal DTV thing? And you're kind of, I think out of the ones we've talked about so far, I mean, this is kind of, it's like the pistol whip might be maybe like kind of, kind of the higher quality of them. But then you've got like these bonkers ones like The Foreigner and Out for a Kill. And this one isn't quite as bonkers, but I think it works on a nice, like, 2 or 3 movie night movie, if you're going to
Yeah, I think so, and I think like it folds in quite nicely with our like previous episode. It doesn't go as full bonkers as like the magic sorcery fight that happens
yes.
at the end of Belly the Beast, but like, um, yeah, like so it never quite reaches that level. Of Belly the Beast has certain moments like that, and the topless messenger that we talked about quite a lot.
Yes. Right,
Like
exactly.
it never quite reaches that level of bonkers, but there is some moments that are not far from that, and it's generally moments surrounding Kuroda and his little gang of three, which, as we said, kind of feel like they're kind of ported in from a Miike film. So yes, I do think that this kind of run, like, there's definitely they share certain points. Out for a Kill, Belly of the Beast, The Foreigner. This one, they all have like too many characters. They all have like convoluted plots, and they all have like these kind of moments of bonkers that keep you watching. That happen regularly enough that you're like you don't completely switch off. They also all have like kind of real kind of dragging bits that you're like, man, is anything gonna happen?
Yeah.
And then but there's just enough bonkers that keeps you kind of like, well, I want to see if there's any other moments like that. Can I see any other jokes? And there's a few. There's definitely a few.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Exactly. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess as we're wrapping up here, Scott, anything else about this movie that we didn't touch on?
No, I think we've kind of. I know we've kind of done it in quite a kind of roundabout way, and we've gone on a lot of detours. But I think that we have actually covered everything that I wanted to talk about. And like, I guess like yeah, the weirdness of the Nyko relationship, and like just the fun of like the Chen and the Kuroda characters were the things I guess I wanted to highlight the most. But I think we've generally covered most of it. I guess like the only thing is like possibly the only disappointment is like William Atherton is like underutilized. Like William Atherton, obviously a classic character actor, and like most famous for like playing dicks. He's
Mhm.
particularly is most famous for playing the dick in Die Hard, and also the dick in Ghostbusters, and yeah, so. I guess we could have like utilized him a bit more, or made him a bit more antagonizing to Seagal, and play into his classic dick persona that William Atherton has. I don't know, like he could. I think he's underserved in the movie, but like yeah. Other than that, I think we've covered everything.
Yeah, no, that's a great play. And that's a great point, right? Because it's like, yeah, I guess with William Atherton, you're expecting that like Bonnie Bedelius, punch in the mouth applause scene when you
Yes.
get at an Atherton, and there's nothing like that here, right? Like he doesn't, I guess for spoilers for people, he doesn't double cross Seagal, he doesn't set him up, he doesn't do anything. The worst thing he does is he sends that Jewel woman to follow him, which doesn't seem to cause any issues anyway. And I think you're right. Like you're almost expecting with Atherton that he's like working for the other team or something, and it never comes to fruition.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and yeah, because like again, that seems like a thing that's kind of almost dropped, because like it's kind of almost set up like he is shady, and he has this woman following him, and all this like, but in the end of the day, like none of that it adds up to anything, and it's like, yeah, actually, it seems like he's fine, like, but they kind of are kind. I don't know if it's like, if it is like a misdirect of like we're supposed to believe he's shady and then he turns out to be fine, like it doesn't even really work on that because he doesn't play enough of a role in the movie for us to care really one way or the other.
Yeah,
So yeah.
yeah, no, that's a great point. Yeah, it's just sort of, oh, we've got William Atherton in this, so we'll just put him in a CIA office and have him talk on the phone, and
Yeah.
that's the extent of it. So yeah, the only other thing I wanted to mention is that stunt coordinator, well, it is listed as Dickie Beer, but he's he's
Mhm.
from the Netherlands, so I think it's maybe beer is pronounced Beer. I don't know
Mhm.
if it's actually beer, but this is the first Seagal movie he does, Into the Sun, as the second unit director, stunt coordinator, etc. But he does a bunch of them. He does Today You Die, Mercenary for Justice, Shadow Man, Attack Force, Flight of Fury, Urban Justice, Pistol Whipped, which we know, a Keeper, which we've done as well. And then he
Wow.
kind of goes into like more like other director video stuff, but he's also done stunt work on some big things. So I think some of his more recent credits, they've been like the new a Jurassic World movie that came out in 2022, Wonder Woman 1984, Triple X Return of Xander Cage. So he's done some stunt work on stuff like that, but also direct to video, still doing like stunt coordinator work. But this is his first Seagal movie that he's does this on. But he has a bit of a run of Seagal movies where he's stunt coordinator, which we've covered some of them. So I just happened to catch that he was in
Mm.
this one.
Yeah, right. I guess like okay, just one more question. The well, it's not a question, it's a statement. But anyway, the other thing I did notice on that level that reminds me that the cinematographer for this film is Don E. Fauntleroy,
Oh,
and Don
right.
E. Fauntleroy would go on to direct Seagal in 3 movies: Today You Die, Mercenary for Justice, which we've covered, and Urban Justice. Those were the three. Those were the 3 Seagal movies he directed.
That's right. I forgot about that. Because right, because today, Urban Justice is another one that and I think Today You Die also he works with Dickie Beer as stunt court as well. Yeah, I completely forgot about that because right, we talked about Donnie Fauntleroy in that Mercenary for Justice episode.
Mercenary for Justice, the episode, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So it's like this small Seagal world, and these people work with him. I mean, I wonder if Donnie Fauntleroy was like, hey, Seagal doesn't seem so bad. Maybe he watched him in this movie and thought, he's not so bad. Maybe and I don't know if Mink was telling him about anything, but maybe he thought I can manage this, and so he signs on for a 3 picture deal to do Seagal movies, and it's like, ugh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Yeah,
I
I'm
don't know.
stuck.
Yeah, 3 does seem a lot, like in the Seagal world, a lot of one and done directors, but
Right.
yeah.
Right, exactly. Well, because that's what happens, right? Is we get the one and done's, and so suddenly it's now like 2 or 3, like Koish, right? Koish did 3 movies with him.
Yeah.
Obviously Keone Waxman did like 9 or 10. So, but it seemed like one of those things where like early on, I think line producers realized like if you're gonna get a director to work with Seagal, sign him on for a couple movies because after the first one, he's probably going to go running, and we'll have to find another director for the next Seagal movie.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, between this one being cinematographer and then directing 3 of them, Fauntleroy working on 4 Seagal movies is not a lot of people willing to do that.
No.
Um, but yeah, you're right. It's like there's this kind of small community around them. With the Halpin being screenwriter or co-screenwriter with him on a lot of projects, and the stuntman who's worked on a lot of his projects, and then there's certain directors like we talked about, like Keone Waxman, like you said, and so there is these recurring characters who pop up kind of again and again in the kind of Seagal verse that we're going through.
Exactly. Well, it's like on the PM podcast, John will post these do these like Facebook and Instagram posts about like PM All Stars, like people that do a lot of
Mhm.
PM flicks. I wonder if we're gonna have like Seagal All Stars, like Keone Waxman, Donnie Fauntleroy, some of these UK actors that we see in like multiple movies too as well. Like they're gonna be the Seagal All Stars.
They absolutely will be. Yes. But I think I have exhausted the listener, and I think I've exhausted all my thoughts on into the sun now. I do hope, dear listener, that you enjoyed this episode, and all the detours weren't too taxing for you. And I mean, I don't know if like Matt is going to do like a separate episode like he did with John Cross, where all the political talk is somewhere else, or is just excised completely. But
Yeah,
Anyway,
well, because that one we had over 4 hours. So you and I have not quite
okay.
gotten that far yet. I think if we
Okay, it's like 3 hours and 20 minutes into this recording, man.
well, that's what it looks like, but actually we've taken breaks. So the actual episode itself
Okay.
is going to be kind of yeah. So we've got a good hour left to go. So
Okay.
we've
Okay.
exhausted it. So yeah. So
Yeah.
3 hours is about my limit usually for. I've done a little longer before. Like I've
Yeah.
and that's when I've kind of started looking at like breaking them off. Is yeah if we
Yeah.
but yeah. So we've got some time, but yeah. I'll see. I'll kind of listen back because sometimes those political asides that we do, they seem like or whatever the asides are, they seem like they
Mhm.
go on for a long time while we're in them. But when I listen back to the
Mhm.
episode, I'm like, I mean, other than that time when we had the World Cup, where I think we talked about the World Cup for an hour to start the episode. Um, it,
Yeah, it was
it,
like it was like yeah, I'm not sure if it was as long as an hour, but like
yeah,
it was at least a solid 45 minutes before
yeah,
we talked about movies at all.
right,
Which did seem quite ridiculous.
right.
Like
Yeah. And I thought about that
yeah.
when I was like, should I keep that or not? And I was like, well, I kind of like the conversation. It's fun. But then also I realized I was like, man, by the time I'm putting this out, the World Cup is going to already be over. So that was another piece of it. So that's
Yeah.
probably what if I had back, I probably would have edited it out. But
Sure.
yeah,
Sure, that makes sense. That
yeah.
makes sense.
But
Yeah.
for the most part, they kind of are woven into the episode. So yeah. But I guess as we're kind of wrapping up here, Scott, anything that you'd like to plug?
Yes, just my traditional plug. Like, I no longer do New Horror Express, my podcast, my horror interview podcast, but episodes are still available. So that's newhorrorexpress.com. But also you can listen to it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and anywhere you get podcasts. It's a show I did from like 2018 till last year, and I have like a lot of interviews, including bonus episodes. There's like around 180 episodes, I think. About 140 of them are interview episodes. So if you're interested in like independent horror and the characters around independent horror, you can listen to that. If you are not so interested in horror and you're interested in the action that we've been talking about, to the kind of action that we've been talking about today, and some better action, I do another podcast called All 90s Action All the Time, which is still currently running. It is a monthly podcast where I chat about action movies from the 90s. Each year, we reflect back on the corresponding year in the 90s. So this year, we've been looking at the films of 1995. So we've covered the likes of Die Hard with Vengeance. We've got like Crimson Tide coming up. We've all sorts of things. Rumble in the Bronx was our opening episode for the year, because we do. I do this thing is a kind of annual tradition now, where we cover a Jackie Chan movie in January, and we call it Chanuary because I thought that was a fun pun. So again, check that out: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get podcasts. And if you're really a special person, and like rate and review, because it puts us higher up in the rankings and more people will come across it, and whatever. So like, if you want to go out there and give us 5 stars and say something nice, then that would be massively appreciated. But if you don't, you just want to check it out, cool, that's also cool. I'm welcome any listeners.
Yeah, and I was so as we're recording this, the most recent episode is Die Hard with a Vengeance. But by the time this
Mhm.
episode comes out, your June episode will have dropped because this is coming out in early July.
Yes,
Um,
so the June episode is Sudden Death, the
oh,
Jean-Claude Van
nice,
Damme film.
nice.
So look forward to that. Like, the the episode largely said, oh, that would be also like, it just reminds me, that would be also like, if he was still with us, that would be a great addition to our Villains Expendables, because
Yeah,
the episode mainly revolves around us just having just praising Purr's Booth to the
yeah,
hilt, because his performance is, oh, chef kiss
yeah.
amazing in that movie. Like, he's so good.
Yes, I can't wait to. So, because I had seen Die Hard with a Vengeance more recently, because I did my solo podcast on the Die Hard movie, so I'd seen it. But I'm going to need to do a sudden death rewatch before I listen to your episode, because and I think the Bulletproof guys have covered it as well. So I got to do a rewatch because yeah, Powers Booth for me. Part of the reason why the exploding helicopter and that is my favorite exploding helicopter is you've got hockey, which is one of my favorite sports, and then you have a villain with a plural first name. And I love, any, whether it's Wings Hauser or Powers Booth, give me a good plural first name. That always helps as well.
Yes, yes.
Yep.
Well, I'm sure you'll enjoy that read because I cannot speak highly enough of Powers Booth's performance in that, and how he is just like he is chewing the scenery. He is just actively stealing any scene from any actor who is opposite him. He is very much hogging the limelight, but like in the absolute best way. And like it's amongst my favorite 90s action villain performances. It's really something. So if people haven't seen it or haven't seen it for a long time, I recommend it for a variety of reasons, but like that would be chief amongst them.
Yeah, it is. It's my favorite Seagal movie. It's been a long time. Well, I don't know. I've always been up and down because I also like Hard Target, and obviously Bloodsport, those ones. But yeah, I mean that movie. It needs a rewatch. I need to watch it again. So because I really love the Die Hard with a Vengeance episode. For people listening to this as well, go back one episode at least, and listen to that one as well because you guys did a great job on that movie too.
And again, I think I just have a thing for villains because a lot of that episode is just me talking about how much I love Jeremy Irons.
Right. Which Jeremy Irons, it was the mention of Jeremy Irons that got us on the political one because I had to mention John Cross saying you look like John Majors.
Thing,
right. Exactly.
It's John Cross's fault. It's
exactly.
John Cross's fault.
I hadn't even thought of John Majors since like the mid 90s until he brought that up. And that's what brought, So
John, it's not our fault. John Cross derailed this podcast.
Exactly. I'm gonna mention it to him and say, listen, you're the reason. Yeah, because of that joke. Yeah, exactly. Right. Well, Scott, thank you again for coming on. This was another fun one. Obviously you will be back in the near future for another Seagal film because we've got a long ways to go. But thank you for coming on to discuss Into the Sun here.
Oh, thank you very much again for having me, Matt. It's always a joy to come on. I really enjoy talking with you about these crazy movies. And yes, we're 11 down. Yeah. We've got like another 25 to go. So yes.
We've got some work ahead of us here, but we'll definitely be back on. But thank you everybody for listening as well. We'll be back soon. Bye everyone.